Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, March 13th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Will Sommer, politics reporter for the Daily Beast, author of Trust the Plan, The Rise of QAnon, and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America. Also on the program today, the Fed and Treasury rush to bail out depositors, the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank. Meanwhile, the question becomes, will we roll back the Dodd-Frank rollback that allowed this bank failure to happen? Incidentally, bank stocks plunge, particularly smaller ones, across the in trading today. We'll talk about that a little bit. Biden administration approves $8 billion Willow project for ConocoPhillips in Alaska. Will put out 2 million cars worth of carbon. Malarkey. Also restricts other Arctic drilling, but
it's a wash.
It's a wash. Norfolk Southern refuses to compensate homeowners in its definition of doing the right thing. Texas judge in the abortion pill case is trying to hide proceedings or even the existence of proceedings from the public.
That's a good sign.
Russia's Bakhmut advance seems to have stalled. Saudi Arabia and Iran agree to talks hosted by China. New report: a Cop City protester, Tortuguita, had his hands raised when he was shot to death by Georgia State Police. And new research shows that vax mandates at colleges reduce deaths by 5% in surrounding communities. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us at the beginning of the week. Here with Emma Vigland.
Hello.
And a lot of news over the weekend. Of course, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. We were talking about it, I think, more or less when the show started on Friday.
Yeah, it broke around that time. And
the FDIC shut it down. We're going to be talking to someone tomorrow. We've got a couple of guests that we're out to who can give us a more detailed breakdown. But we will be going through this. I mean, the bottom line is there was this bank. Well, I mean, the easiest. I mean, there's a lot of different angles to this, but let's just start with this clip. And it will help us explain more or less what happened. Understand that federally insured banks, the FDIC is constantly monitoring different banks to see what their exposure is in terms of how much money they have actually literally in the bank, whether they can cover depositors, whether they have leveraged too much of their deposits in terms of loans, and when they think there's a problem, they come in and they shut the bank down. Here is James Comer. He is the Representative James Comer Is he a chairman of the banking?
He's the chair of the oversight committee.
He's chair of the oversight committee, and he's explaining why the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And this is one angle you probably won't hear from most rational human beings.
I get your take on the news of the day, and that is this Silicon Valley Bank loss and this failure. You were on a bank board. You're the chairman of the oversight committee. What should be done here?
Well, look, this is something that I worry could be a trend. Usually when one bank goes down, more banks go down. And what we've seen early on from articles I've read in the Wall Street Journal and other financial publications is they invested a lot of cash that I would assume they had from things like the PPP loan, government policy, and they invested it in bonds. And then because the Democrats spent too much money in all their stimulus, the bonds go down when interest rates go up. The Fed had to raise interest rates to combat the Democrat inflation. And then we see now coming out that they were one of the most woke banks in their quest for the ESG type policy and investing. This could be a trend, and there are consequences for bad Democrat policy. And I think we need to keep an eye on all the banking sector right now.
Well, we're waiting for a solution. We are expecting.
I mean,
that's all they've got.
I mean, I wonder if there's anybody out there, anyways, who could like really understand what he was talking about. I mean, I get what he's saying. But he's trying to blame so much of it on Democrats and things like COVID relief that caused inflation, which didn't really cause inflation, and that caused the Fed to raise its interest rates, which has a unique impact in some respects out on Silicon Valley. Because when so many of these companies, we've talked about this as to why they have been laying off a lot of people as interest rates go up. They don't have much cash coming in relative to the size of their companies. A lot of these companies stay afloat through low cost loans. A lot of them are startups, and they're just trying to increase their valuations so that somebody comes along and buys them out. But when the cost of money, when the interest rate goes up, that becomes harder to do. So they start to lay off people. And the Silicon Valley Bank was particularly susceptible to this. And they were issuing a lot of loans. And then a lot of the so-called small businesses that had that had all their money there, above the threshold of the $250,000 in which the FDIC insures for each depositor. Something like 90% of their deposits were above this. And what was happening is at one point, like a lot of these companies need to come in and get cash because their loans are too expensive. Maybe they can't cover payroll or something to that effect. Meanwhile, this bank is overexposed because a lot of the interest rates go up. And there was another issue as to why they were able to avoid regulators seeing that they were the relationship between how much they had in the bank and the loans that they had out there was so out of whack. There's a reason. Supposedly they have about $200 billion in assets in this bank. In 2017, they would have gotten a lot of scrutiny for every dollar or once they passed a $50 billion threshold. But because of a bill pushed by Crapo from Delaware, right?
Yeah.
Is that where you're from? The banker.
Idaho.
Idaho? Sorry. From Crapo, and frankly, I mean, Democrats were on board with this as well.
50
Chris Coons was
Republicans.
there for it.
Yeah, 50 Republicans voted for it. 17 Democrats.
Right.
Voted
All
for
of the corporate like guys like Coons and Warner,
Yeah,
and,
Warner, right.
and Tester, all the people getting the money. And here is Donald Trump announcing the rollback of Dodd-Frank. Essentially, it wasn't a rollback, but it was changing the threshold in which the Dodd-Frank regulations, in particularly in terms of like your deposits to loan ratio, was essentially rose.
Increased by like 5 times. So
5 times.
50
to
to
250.
And that's why, explicitly lobbied for by the CEO of this bank, SVB.
We've done. But we've kept yet another promise as I signed the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act into law. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for our country.
Pause it for 1 second. You forget, but like, what the heck? Like, can't they just even put makeup on his eyes?
You don't understand. You've never been in a tanning bed before. Regretfully, I have. You have to put those little things on, and so that is just.
But can't they then just put makeup on his eyes afterwards? I mean, come on,
it's hard to match.
That's very
eyebrows in a very natural way that has been unable to be reproduced by makeup. So
this is
sorry.
2018, and you can look at Mike Pence. So longingly looking at him, who would know that 5 years later he would have to turn on this one, and this great man.
This is truly a great day for America and a great day for American workers and small businesses all throughout the nation. The legislation I'm signing today rolls back the crippling Dodd-Frank regulations that are crushing community banks and credit unions nationwide. They were in such trouble. One size fits all. Those rules just don't work. And community banks and credit unions should be regulated the same way. And you have to really look at this. They should be regulated the same way.
Lost.
With proviso for safety, as in the past when they were vibrant and strong. But they shouldn't be regulated the same way as the large, complex.
We're so
All
small.
right, let me just explain what just happened there. He got lost where he was reading, and he said they should be regulated the same way, when in fact the law that pushed there said they shouldn't be regulated in the same way, because, and he had to do that whole thing. So all of that was just muckety-muck. You have to understand that basically he's just saying they shouldn't be regulated in the same way, because what's the possible danger? Go ahead.
Financial institutions, and that's what happened, and they were being put out of business one by one, and they weren't lending. Since its passage in 2010, Dodd-Frank has dealt a huge blow to community banking. As a candidate, I pledged that we would rescue these community banks from Dodd-Frank, the disaster of Dodd-Frank, and now we are keeping that commitment, and all of the people with me are keeping that commitment.
Yeah. Well, community banking, these are not small mom and pop banks. These are banks with up to $250 billion in assets. And now, we're so small. We're just, helping out in our little regional areas. But now we're too small to be regulated, but we're also too big to fail. So please give us government money now.
And to be clear, supposedly the story is that shareholders and the bank itself is going to take a bath on this, but it's protecting depositors. But there's been some reporting to this effect, and I have a feeling this is going to be the big story, is that two things were going on with this Silicon Valley Bank. One, you open up an account there, you've got a startup, you need a very low cost loan. The bank says, sure, we're going to give you, or here's the deal. If you have X amount of dollars in this bank, we will give you a low cost loan. And I have a feeling that this was not just the case for these small businesses, in quotes, but also the individuals. You put $500,000 in our bank and you park it here. This is the way it works, for bankers, for normal stuff. If you keep, $1,000 in your checking account, you're going to get a toaster, or you're going to get, we're going to waive fees on, your checks or something like that. There's a dynamic that exists. That same dynamic exists in this big dollar figure. Put $500,000 in our bank, and your mortgage, the prevailing mortgage rate's 3.5. You're going to get a 1% mortgage. You put $750,000 in our bank, you're going to get a 0% mortgage for 10 years and it'll grow then to the prevailing. There is no doubt in my mind this dynamic is what's going on here, because there's no way all of that money was that dumb to not know that their money wasn't insured over $250,000. They took a risk to get all of these financial benefits. And in some instances, these small businesses, they did that because they wanted cheap capital to grow their business, and they were willing to assume the risk until they weren't willing to assume the risk.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on there. Now, I understand theoretically that supposedly the taxpayer's not bailing them out. But let's just be clear on what the dynamic is here. They took the risk. These are all the same people who are going to say, like, shouldn't forgive any college loans. They took the risk because they got a benefit from it. That's supposedly the whole point. That's the whole reason why people make interest on loans, because there's risk associated with it. That's what we keep getting told over and over again, except for when the risk goes the wrong direction, then they get a bailout.
Well, what happens when more regional banks fall, if they do, right? Because when you're seeing how small of a percentage of their money was actually from retail deposits, you've got to think that like the regular person is mostly putting their money into a national bank, right? More of these regional banks are going to fall, and then
I'm not convinced that more of these regional banks are going to fall. It's just a question of whether there's going to be a bank run in these banks, and whether they're as they're as highly leveraged as this one in Sanford, in Silicon Valley. My guess is most of these banks aren't, just by nature of I think part of this was unique to the function of the businesses there. There may be a couple here or there that are. Maybe it's even more widespread. We don't know, and that's the whole point of the rollback of the Dodd-Frank thing. But, and I understand the value of making all these people whole, because that means that less of these small banks are going to have bank runs. But the bottom line is that it is very important that we all know what's going on here, because when they talk about you don't want the moral hazard, or you took the risk when you went and took out a college loan, or whatever it is, understand there's two sets of rules here.
It's a good reminder to advocate for postal banking, right, Sam?
Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't put, if I had the problem of having more than $250,000 in the bank, I would put it in two different banks. But,
right.
Because I don't have enough, to get that, 0% mortgage.
Yeah. I mean, can I just say one thing on the diversity thing, which is silly, but also it's going to be the main talking point for the Republican Party. I think in the wake of this, these banks are too woke, but what does that mean? They're investing in too many and hiring too many Black and LGBT people. I just looked up Chase, Citigroup, JP Morgan, they all have diversity stuff.
Which is so funny, because this 2018 bill weakened diversity requirements for these banks. That's what happened in this bill.
Right.
Yeah, the idea, he's just basically saying they've hired too many women and people of color, and they're not competent to make loans. That's what the argument is.
That's insane. I feel like we've devolved since 2008, because was it that stupid 2008? They've gone too woke?
No.
They had, what was their, what did they say for that? They had nothing? I was too young for that.
I guess it's too much giving Black people houses, I guess maybe.
Oh. That's exactly what it was.
Okay.
Yes. It was, yes. Oh God, it's all coming back to me now. Yes, it was all about the CRA, I think it was, the Community Reinvestment Act. And that, the Democrats were too eager to give Black people houses, and so they took out mortgages they couldn't afford, and that was the story. But that was the big fight. That was definitely the big fight. This one will be the bankers are just too woke. We're going to get to Will Sommer in just a moment. Talk about QAnon. I mean, it's insanity.
Yeah.
But folks, in the meantime, a couple of words from our sponsors. I'm going to release this this video. We got to cut it up a little bit. I think it's a little bit too long. I watched it. The fake, what was it, Amazon or whatever it was. But they wanted my credit card number. They called while I was sitting here at the desk. They wanted my credit card number. They wanted my name. Of course, I always give out John Benjamin's. And soon if I just figure out what his credit card number, I'll do that, and his social security number. But in the meantime, how am I so confident to do that I've protected myself and my online identity? Aura. Yes. Today's show sponsored in part by Aura. Aura is an easy-to-use app that includes everything you need to stay safe online. It protects you from scammers and hackers by scanning the so-called dark web. This is where criminals sell stolen information. It'll look for your emails. It'll look for your passwords. It'll look for your social security numbers. And it alerts you fast if it finds anything. If Aura finds any of this information, you go out, you cancel your credit cards, you protect yourself. Knowing that it's out there is the key. They also help you fight back against those websites that publish your public information. They do auto requesting of removing it, helps reduce robocalls, and helps with operational security. They give you real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries. Somebody's opening up a loan or a credit card in your name. I got one of these when I opened up an account for my daughter. Fortunately, I knew it was me, but next time, who knows? Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. They protect your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, all of that stuff. The bad guys can't break in. They can also help you manage what your kids do with their devices. You can set screen time limits, focus time. You can restrict specific apps. They have a password manager that lets you store and access your online passwords securely and conveniently. And maybe you have an app that does one of these things, but the beauty of Aura is you don't have to download and pay for 7 different apps. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link. You can try it out, see if you like it. You'll see. And when you put your email in, you're going to be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds. Go to aura.com/majority. That's AURA.com/majority. Start your free trial. We will link that in the podcast and YouTube description, of course. And lastly, still a lot of people getting hired. If you are hiring people, you are competing with other employers. How do you break through that clutter? Stand out to employees, people who are most qualified for your business? Well, I'll tell you how we did it. ZipRecruiter. And right now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/majority. There is a bunch of ways that ZipRecruiter helps you stand out to your perfect hire. ZipRecruiter has technology that sends you great candidates for your job. And then you can send a personal invite to your top choices, make more of an impact that way. Show them that you are interested in them. ZipRecruiter also makes it easy for candidates to apply to your job. In fact, they can apply with one tiny click. ZipRecruiter offers attention-grabbing labels like urgent and training provided, remote, and more that's going to catch the eye of your quality candidates. That's how we got old Brendan on the show. Also, their user interface is really excellent for people like myself. Near boomers, not quite. Just a great way to hire. You can get your job noticed by the best and brightest candidates with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Go see for yourself. Go to this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/majority. You can try ZipRecruiter for free. The best time, incidentally, to put out feelers for when you need to hire somebody is when you don't need to hire somebody. So you get a sense of what's out there. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/majority, MAJORITY. ZipRecruiter, it's the smartest way to hire. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Will Sommer. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report joining us. He is the politics reporter for the Daily Beast. He is author of Trust the Plan, The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America. Will, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We've read so much of your reporting over the years on this program. And I think, our audience is probably as well-versed in Q-ness as some will come. But there was a lot that I learned. First off, one of the things I did not realize is where the adrenochrome, where that came from, or how it got popular. Let's just tell us the story of adrenochrome, because I think, like, on some level, it gives hint to how, to the nature of how this started in some way. I think, like, not literally, but like how the Q conspiracy started.
Sure. So yeah, QAnon believers think that the world elites torture and sexually abuse children, eat them in satanic rituals so that they get this substance in their heads, their pineal glands, called adrenochrome, and you drink it and you stay young forever. But the backstory here is that this all goes back to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where Hunter S. Thompson writes, he's making up all these drugs he's taking, and his lawyer says, well, here you go. Here's this drug called adrenochrome. You can only get it from a pedophile. And so that's where it comes from. I mean, so it's really how many, like, a hall of mirrors that it ends up, motivating all these crimes and January 6th and all this crazy stuff.
But how much of it is also like a derivation of the stem cell freak out, or like the anti-abortion stuff as well? I mean, there's this very evangelical tilt to the conspiracy theory, which is this fixation on the purity of children, that I think has this religious touchstone.
Emma, I think that's a great point. I hadn't even considered the stem cell aspect to it, but certainly thinking back to those debates during the Bush administration, all that, this idea that children are being, like, rendered down, to keep old people alive. I mean, that's really a great point. I think that probably plays into it. I mean, so much of the stuff is not like there's a direct line, but it's these kind of like psychic tropes and these emotions and stuff like that. So I think that's definitely part of it.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit, because I want to circle back to a lot of that stuff about the religiosity associated with this. But let's start back to its beginnings, because I think, like, if there's somebody out there, and I think we can all agree that it's not real. Okay, I mean, let's just start with that. Like, maybe there's some disagreement, but let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that none of this is real, that somebody started this as a lark, right? There's no way you start something like this and think, like, maybe L. Ron Hubbard thought this, but like, I'm going to do this as a lark and see if I can start my own religion or whatnot. But the idea that this sort of, like, one of the linchpins comes from a Hunter S. Thompson writing suggests to me that this is somebody who was like, this was like just a prank, right? I mean, give us a sense of like what you understand as being, who was the original Q and how it grew and what the original intentions were.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of who's behind Q, who kicked it all off, I mean, I think it's we haven't seen it proven conclusively, but I think there's a lot of good arguments that it was originally this guy named Paul Ferber, who's a programmer in South Africa, and maybe some people working with him. And these are people who are themselves really deep into conspiracy theories. But basically on 4chan, where Q originated, there was this history of people pretending to be leakers. And so they'd say, I'm the Hollywood leaker, I'm the FBI leaker. And everyone would say, you're lying, get out of here. To the extent that one guy actually did leak military secrets on the board legitimately, and everyone said, get out of here, loser, whatever. But so Paul Ferber tries this on in this theory, and he's trying to spread the word about the conspiracy theories he believes. And then it sort of just gets out of hand to the extent that, he can't come out and say he's Q because it's supposed to be Don Jr. or Dan Scavino. So he just has to say, like, I'm Q's best friend. And kind of trying to associate himself with it. And then ultimately, according to this theory, which I find pretty credible, it's stolen by the guys who run 8chan, who, this is in the HBO QAnon documentary. QAnon gets kicked off of 4chan, ends up on 8chan, And then these guys say, oh, maybe we should keep this for ourselves. And they basically hijack it.
And you keep it for yourself because it's it's a good marketing ploy.
Yeah, I mean, it brings people to their website, which I think, aside from, it's also a big place to post for mass shooters, to post their manifestos, but otherwise no one goes there. And so I think these are also just mischievous guys. I mean, Ron and Jim Watkins, they seem to love messing with people, and what better way than QAnon?
Do you think that there's they're messing with people? Are they just messing with people who are going to believe this stuff, or was there any type of ideological, I mean, I have to say, I would be lying if I didn't think at times, I have had ideas to do something similar to this. I mean, it was more I would figure out how to directly monetize it. I was, going to do the real Obama is not giving you, and it ends where he's not giving you single payer healthcare. But for the entire movie, I could sell that, on Alex Jones or something like that. Do you think that they were specifically choosing did they have any type of ideological desire to mess with certain people, or was it just sort of we're just going for the most messable people?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are right-wing guys who are particularly the father, Jim Watkins, I think is very steeped in American far-right ideology. I mean, he tried to launch this news website, news, I say lightly here, called the Goldwater, and of course Barry Goldwater. I mean, this is a guy who's kind of calling back on these old kind of boomer conservatism tropes. So I think they saw it as and obviously they deny being behind it, but I think they saw it as sort of the ends justify the means sort of way to radicalize more people in America.
And his son ran for Congress, right?
Yes.
In Arizona. But trolling is ideological. The way that they troll is in the same vein as, I would say, the way white supremacists, or in that shooter who was targeting the gay nightclub in Colorado came out and said, "Oh, I'm non-binary," and then we didn't hear anything about it, right? And to me, that was just a classic 8chan, 4chan, alt-right online troll move where you're trying to goad people into stepping in it, right? And there's a whole brand of kind of antisocial online right-wing, typically young male people who go to these kinds of sites who enjoy that, right? It's almost like a philosophy of messing with people. It's pretty antisocial, but I think there's a connection there with the Watkinses and how they run their site.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I mean, you mentioned these white supremacist sort of 4chan campaigns. You think of the doing the OK sign thing, which obviously not everyone doing the OK sign is white supremacist, but then they'll use it that way. I mean, in the case of Jim Watkins, I met him while I was reporting on the book, and he's wearing pizza socks and he's got a Q pin. And so I said, "Oh, is this a reference to Pizzagate?" And he said, "Well, what are you possibly talking about?" Or, I've never heard of QAnon. I mean, this kind of very bald-faced lying that is sort of a real-life trolling.
But what's the value? I mean, I don't understand trolling in that way. Do they think they're radicalizing? Because I think in terms of a political movement, I'm a little bit, it's disturbing that a significant portion of the country believes this stuff. But I'm not convinced it necessarily helps the right wing ultimately if, people are going down this rabbit hole, because, I mean, at one point there's going to be blowback that Marjorie Taylor Greene is, assistant speaker of the House practically at this point. I mean, do you get the sense they think it helps their political ideology to have people out there going RFK is, JFK is going to, Junior is going to show back up somewhere? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a case of it's sort of getting away from them. I mean, I think perhaps they saw it as advantageous to have people think Hillary Clinton ate children. Maybe this is going to radically get some more votes. But I agree with you. It's not a great look to have a couple hundred people wandering around Dallas, looking for Tupac or JFK or as you say, I mean, for Marjorie Taylor Greene to be such a prominent figure in the party, then you can look up her talking about Jewish space lasers and stuff like that.
It's what you say, Sam, right? It's about there being value in saying something publicly to the broader audience, right? Where they're saying, "Oh, we would never believe in this," but then they have their own in-group language, and that's activating. This is just like a more extreme version of what you would say Limbaugh does.
Well, I mean, and I know, Will, you grew up as a Limbaugh listener.
A ditto head, yes.
Yes, I did not, but not. I did not subscribe to it. But he was the sort of, I guess, the innovator of a lot of this stuff about, like, Clinton and Vince Foster and drag the body into the park and that type of thing. And it makes a lot more sense in the context of they thought they were creating that, and it just kept going. And that's what it feels like a little bit. And what I also found amazing, and I sort of like maybe have seen it in bits and pieces, but to see it in one place, the status of some of the people who believe in this. Michael Flynn was like extremely powerful in our government. Ginny Thomas, Marjorie Taylor Greene, these people seem to be true believers.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a story in the Daily Beast last week about the woman who helped Maria Bartiromo and Sidney Powell create the Dominion thing that obviously has landed Fox in this lawsuit. And she, to be frank, was a total whack job. I mean, it was all based on her one email, and this is the email where she says, Antonin Scalia was murdered in a human hunting expedition, all this stuff. And so it's really striking. You mentioned the Ginny Thomas text where she's texting Mark Meadows and saying, I saw this video about how, they're going to ship all these Democrats to Guantanamo Bay. And just the line between just like utter whack job internet person to some of the most powerful people in our government, I think it's striking how really thin it is.
Well, I mean, you do a lot of reporting on families where, somebody has gone across that threshold. And, and more often than not, or I guess, well, I don't know. I mean, you tell me. More often than not, are the family just sort of horrified? Because I'm thinking in terms of Ginny Thomas, like the most charitable view that one can have is that Clarence Thomas gets home from the Supreme Court every day from work, and Ginny's there, and she's like, "You're not going to believe this," and what are the chances that we can go to this rally where JFK is going to show up or something? And he's just like, "Oh gosh, this is really sad," or like, how much is his worldview influenced by this? Like, that's the thing, right? I mean, but you saw other families. Tell us like what your sense is of how this works in other families. So what the sort of like, I guess the range of possible reactions at the Thomas dinner table is.
Yeah. I mean, it really does range in a lot of ways, as you say. I mean, I followed a family for a year as their son, who was in his 20s, got into QAnon. And it always starts with sort of a remark that you go, like, wait a minute, what'd you say? In this case, the son came in and said, Dad, I want you to be prepared. A lot of celebrities are going to get arrested soon. Oprah, Tom Hanks, they're going to Guantanamo Bay. And the dad said, well, I hope it's not Tom Selleck because I like him, and kind of laughed it off. And then, cut to a year of his kid getting more and more into QAnon. I talked to a woman whose husband got insanely into QAnon. He got addicted to coke because he wanted to stay up all night in case, a QAnon clue arrived. He'd have to stay up. He started having affairs with all these QAnon believers because he felt so isolated that his wife didn't believe in it. So, I mean, it gets pretty crazy. So I think it's a great point to think about what Clarence Thomas's home life is like. And, you kind of have to wonder, especially for someone who's so conservative himself, it's kind of hard to imagine that he's saying, oh, that's crazy every single time.
Yeah, I really wonder about that. I mean, because they've had, she's like in the past, like during, I can't remember when it was, but Ginny Thomas was like sending letters, still holding on to the hearings, angry at the testimony against Clarence Thomas. And if I remember correctly, this is like within the past decade, I feel like. I really wonder what that dynamic is, because if Clarence Thomas believes a fraction of what it seems possible Ginny Thomas does, that seems really about as disturbing as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, these text messages, she thinks that, Democrats are all going to be rounded up and arrested. And so, I mean, when then it comes to the Supreme Court being asked to rule on the election, stuff like that, I mean, it's definitely disturbing.
give us a notion of like how much this like why do you think this caught on in the way that it did? I mean, because some of it does feel, well, so much of it is like there's religious iconography. Like who is the person that's most susceptible to this? Because I mean, I think like my theory is that if you've already got, are in deep on some type of fundamentalist religion, making that shift over to Q or into some deep spiritual, it doesn't necessarily have to be a, organized religion, that your mode of thought is open to that.
Yeah, I mean, just to, since Emma mentioned the religious aspect earlier, I mean, it is huge. The overlap between evangelical Christianity and especially Pentecostalism and QAnon is huge from what I've seen. I mean, when I go to these QAnon events, they'll do these, very charismatic religious things. They'll do the altar calls. People will do speaking in tongues. And I think, an aspect of that is this idea of modern day apostles or prophets. So you have these people who say, well, my prophecy is that Donald Trump will be elected in 2016 or these various things. And so if you already buy into that, it doesn't seem like that big a leap for a lot of these people to then say, well, maybe there is this Q guy who is, sort of telling me about this secret war with the devil. So I mean, the religious thing is huge. Initially, people getting into QAnon tended to be kind of like a Trump rally crowd, older, whiter, because it was so focused on Trump. But especially with the pandemic, when people got, more people were sort of looking for answers and they had a lot more time online, we start seeing it sort of spread out into younger people, more people of color, more women. So really, at this point, it's often someone who maybe already has something a little weird going on with them, and then they hear about QAnon and then they get all in.
There's the Satanism is fascinating too, because I also think you can connect it to how there's the demonization of trans people right now. There are demons among us. They're trying to go after your kids, make them trans, make them gay, and there's this kind of artificial morality ascribed to like a mission and into belief against fact that you can also tie into, Jesus is coming any day now. Not to make this like a anti-religion thing, but when you go far down that rabbit hole, it's the search for signs, and they've just kind of copy and pasted that onto Donald Trump as the savior in this instance.
Yeah, I mean, they really see that it's so key to the QAnon belief system, and really, like, religion is like we've been talking about, is just right next to that. I mean, you hear people who get into QAnon because of their religion, or people who are brought to Christianity by QAnon, who are not in a church, and then they start hearing so much about the devil and Jesus and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's so key to the QAnon belief system that, like, the devil is a real guy, a real force, and he's out there in the world and he has these agents. And it's your job as a QAnon believer and as a Christian to, you are on the front lines, you are fighting here. And, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think QAnon has played a significant role in the trans panic and this backlash to LGBT rights, to say that, this idea that they're after the children, I think fits right into that.
How much of a role did Jeffrey Epstein or like what was his impact on like the Q phenomena, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was huge for recruiting people in. I mean, even before the charges that culminated in his death, he was kind of a foundational story in QAnon. And then after he died, and look, I'm not saying there wasn't anything weird to that. I mean, when he died,
without doubt,
I thought, like, how dumb do they think we are? I mean, I don't know what happened, but it looked really suspicious. And obviously a lot of people thought that way. And I think for some of those people, that then was used as a gateway into QAnon, where these QAnon believers would say, well, don't you think it's messed up that, Jeffrey Epstein did this? And of course people would say, of course. And they say, well, let me tell you about the cabal. And so it goes from there.
Well, he's Jewish too, right? That helps, right? That helps the conspiracy theory.
Well, but I think what it does show, though, is like on a structural level, like what QAnon does for its adherents. Like, you have this thing with Epstein, and I think like a lot of people had the exact same reaction that you did, which is like, seriously? Like, the cameras were off, and I mean, I have deep suspicions as to what happened there. But because there's no answer, sometimes it's just like too hard to sort of troll around and live with something that is not resolved. And on some level, Q, it was one of the things that comes in and provides an answer. for that question and other questions. I mean, in that way, it functions a lot like religion.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they do studies of people who are susceptible to conspiracy theories, it is often this inability to sort of deal with unanswered questions or contradictions. And QAnon and other conspiracy theories offer a much simpler way of viewing the world, and one that I think can be empowering in some ways, even as it's disempowering in others. Because it says, with the pandemic, for example, or Jeffrey Epstein, rather than there are all these complex factors, there are all these things we don't know. It's just this is a group of guys who did it. They're at fault.
So, as a political force, where is Q now? Do we have any type of data on how many of these people vote? How many of these people I think it's a problem, and I think answer that question. I get some other questions about where this places in history, but do we have a sense of as a political force, how big of a deal it is?
Yeah, so looking at polls, and I like to take sort of the most conservative ones in terms of not some of the tenets of QAnon, but for people who say yes, I believe in QAnon, they rate between 3% and 7% of respondents. That's millions of people, and when you expand it out to do world elites run a satanic cabal that abuses children, that gets much bigger, and that's in the teens of people saying yes. Now. Q in late December 2020 told his followers to stop identifying so openly as QAnon believers because I think they were getting banned from social media. The brand had kind of become tarnished. But I think in many ways, QAnon has succeeded in getting this conspiratorial idea of, world elites out to abuse children, maybe through the LGBT rights movement. This idea that the election was stolen. A lot of that stuff has really become mainstreamed in the GOP. And in terms of QAnon itself, Donald Trump is signaling to them constantly on Truth Social. He's posting memes about QAnon and how great it is. So in 2024, I think we might see it surge back. And the one thing I'd add is, he's also gearing up to call Ron DeSantis a pedophile. Trump is sort of laying the groundwork for that. So I could see that fitting right in with a sort of QAnon resurgence.
Do we have a historical, have we had phenomena like this in history where there was this much of an adherence? I mean, look, I could make the argument that Opus Dei is not terribly different from this. And we have, I think it was Scalia was Opus Dei, and I think maybe Alito might be. And it's possible Thomas. I mean, in terms of reporting, I think there's arguments that, certain religions that are out there also have some pretty wacky ideas that are, but do we have any historical precedents for this?
Yeah, obviously there have been movements based on conspiracy theories before, and certainly elite groups like Opus Dei. But I don't think there's anything with sort of this broad, certainly in American history, this sort of broad base of support that is, not just they believe in conspiracy theories, but they have this moment called the storm that is their big fascist moment where Donald Trump takes over the country. And, everyone lives in utopia if you didn't get sent to Guantanamo Bay. And so, I don't think there is anything like that really sort of activates people and says, you need to
except
bring
for
about
Christianity.
I was going to say that's the rapture.
Second coming,
yeah,
right? Except for the original version of that, which a huge, it seems to be people subscribing to, but there's no there's no sort of there hasn't been a similar sort of are there divisions within Q? Are we starting to see Q denominations?
Oh yeah. Oh, this is some of the most fascinating stuff about it is this. I mean, there are all these kind of, as you say, there's kind of mainline QAnon, and then there's the JFK Jr. crew, and then there's sort of the more extreme JFK Jr. crew, and there's the just people who see symbols and numbers and letters and all this kind of stuff. And what's fascinating is how they all hate each other. And they say, we are the serious QAnon people. We're the patriot researchers. These guys are making us look like idiots.
But they're all election deniers, right? I mean, in the end, that's what this is. This is what it's become. QAnon is becoming the election denier movement within the Republican Party, which I think is a way to launder the conspiracy kind of thinking for electoral purposes, to kind of go back to what Sam was saying there. But that part of looking for numbers and signs and stuff underneath the surface is fascinating to me, because like all good conspiracy theories, it does provide a simple solution and bad people to answer life's questions and make people feel better. But what it also does is it activates the conspiracy theorists as people who are agents of change in and of themselves. They're little detectives looking for blood libel in this instance or pedophilia in this instance. Like, how much of that is a sense of when you speak to people who are in QAnon, the fact that they have agency over their own lives in politics in particular?
Yeah, I mean, they love it. I mean, it gives you this sense of, that the real truth of the world, as one guy said, that I know the news before it happens. And so even if you have, whether you're kind of a marginal existence or you're just kind of a mundane one that you're bored with, I mean, QAnon gives you this status. It gives you a community. And as you said, I mean, you can go, they call it baking because the breadcrumbs. And so you can kind of go into the clues and research them. And then if you find a particularly good bake, as it were, an explanation for the clues, you're valorized, and you can even make a lot of money, depending how prominent you get in QAnon.
Yeah, you write about that guy. What was it? Neon
Revolt. Yes.
Yeah. Neon Revolt. Yeah. Tell us about Neon Revolt.
Yeah. So this is a guy who was a failed screenwriter from New Jersey. He had gone out and sort of written some, based on what I read, it's sort of some failed like Kevin Smith knockoffs. And so he comes back to New Jersey. He's living with his folks, and he feels that he got screwed in Hollywood because he was a white man. And he's working in the freezer
This
section.
Sounds like the Ben Shapiro story.
I mean, I think a lot of these guys are, Steven Crowder, like all these guys with entertainment backgrounds. Michael Knowles, obviously in the news. And so, he's working in the freezer section at a grocery store, and he's like, this is my domain. And then he loses the freezer. And so he gets transferred. And so he's just like this guy who's like a very, he feels the world is slipping away from him, and he has like an online girlfriend, and they break up and all this stuff, and then he discovers QAnon. And not only can he, because most of these people can't write at all, and so he has this ability to write these blog posts, but also he can turn them on his old enemies. And so he picks the guy who created the blacklist, the list of these Hollywood screenplays, a very powerful executive. And he says,
Franklin Leonard, we should say, is his
exactly.
name, right?
And so he says, I'm going to get my revenge. And then he writes all these blog posts saying, the king of the Hollywood pedos is Franklin Leonard. And most of these QAnon people, they'd never heard of this guy. And suddenly Franklin, because he didn't pick this guy up from the slush pile or whatever, he's suddenly getting all these death threats and stuff like this.
That's like The Player. Isn't that isn't that the storyline from The Player, from Altman's The Player?
You're right. Yeah, the death threats to the Tim Robbins character. That's a great point.
All of this just seems to be like just sort of low end regurgitated showbiz stuff, but it's just catching on. Well, I'm curious, the different denominations within Q, do they have different names? In other words, it's like, I'm pissed at you because you don't believe fully the version of the JFK Jr.'s returning story that I have. Am I like, how do I refer to me and to someone who also shares my belief to disparage, Emma, who thinks that, JFK he's alive, but he's going to stay on the secret island and he's not going to come back, or whatever the sort of like fundamental differences that we have within Q. How do we have specific like denominative names?
Well, usually they are identified by sort of which QAnon promoters they follow. And so, you might say that, this guy, the Negative 48 group, those are the most hardcore JFK Jr. people, for example. Someone might say, those guys are ridiculous. I follow this Telegram channel, We the Media, or what have you. And it gets so crazy because these people who want to make QAnon respectable, these people who are taking positions in their local Republican parties, it drives them nuts to see people wandering around Dallas saying, there's Tupac, there's Robin Williams. And so, some of these guys end up like me at a QAnon convention going around and, they're a QAnon promoter, but this guy's saying, this guy's ridiculous. I can't believe this garbage. So, I mean, it gets very vicious. And, that's part of what makes the reporting on it fun, because then they'll call me up and say, this guy got arrested and stuff like this.
What's give us a sense of like where we are in the trajectory of QAnon. Like if there was I mean, you've given us some numbers as to like how many people we're talking about, but if you were to sort of like graph it, where are we on the graph at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I think certainly sort of the first QAnon era came to an end with Joe Biden's inauguration. I mean, people might say January 6th, but really even after
inauguration.
Well, they say it's being filmed at Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta. So, they,
that's a black guy.
Well, that's yeah. And so, at the inauguration, obviously there were all these soldiers after January 6th and these fences, and they said, well, that's to arrest them. And I would just say, well, it's because they did January 6th. Like, that's why all the soldiers are there. But after he was inaugurated, they felt, oh no, now Trump can't do the storm. But now, as Trump sort of returns to the public eye, I think potentially we're going to see an upswing. And, it could also happen that we see this reemerge under a new name. I mean, Pizzagate is kind of a QAnon precursor. And that really went away after the shooting at Comet Ping Pong, where suddenly Alex Jones was facing lawsuits. No one wanted to talk about Pizzagate. And then it came back as QAnon. So it may reemerge as something else.
Is QAnon sort of like, if we were to look at, if Pizzagate was sort of a precursor, was the Tea Party also? I mean, the crossover, it seems to me like a very similar cohort of people. And having like interviewed people back then, it seemed like they were on the road to something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sam. I think, when you look at who's drawn to QAnon, it is often people, I think, who would have been in the Tea Party movement, if they weren't. I mean, it's very similar. There's a similar kind of like, we're this grassroots army. And I mean, they don't like a lot of Republican leaders in the same way that the Tea Party did, that they see them as rhinos and, they're going to take back America with or without them. And so I think it's similar in that way, but it's almost like, I guess the difference is I don't hear a lot of QAnon people talking about lowering taxes or, bailing out the 47% or whatever. I mean, it's almost like the Tea Party movement decided to get something much more visceral. And I think what happened in between there is, we think of the Tea Party in 2010, and then Republicans really get much deeper into conspiracy theories with more birtherism, Jade Helm, stuff like this. And then I think this is the result.
About that.
Yeah, the birtherism is where you, I think, can connect the Tea Party, right? The Obama's secretly born in Kenya. I mean, and you can't convince me otherwise. And there was no coincidence that Trump is at the center of that too, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And really like a proto QAnon in many ways, in that you had all these kind of wackos emerging from the internet to say, I know the birth certificate's fake and stuff. And, Jerome Corsi was involved in both of them in really the inception of them.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, like, and if the president's getting away with being a secret, a secret socialist from a different country, I mean, who knows who's involved in this thing?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And the beauty of QAnon in terms of its appeal is you have all these, you have Jade Helm, you have birtherism, and QAnon gives you an answer for who's behind everything. And any sort of current event you care about, it's the cabal.
Remind everybody about Jade Helm, because this was a big, like, I remember this. It didn't reach this sort of like national fervor, but like it involved like, a huge, like maybe a quarter of the United States was going to be invaded by Obama's special army in Washington or something. Right.
Yeah. So a huge part of the Southwest and Texas, and I think New Mexico and some other states, there's going to be this large military exercise called Jade Helm 15, I think. And conservatives latched onto this to believe that it was essentially an excuse to arrest Republicans and that they were going to turn Walmarts into concentration camps and all this. And it's sort of an early sign of how deep conspiracy theories were getting into the GOP, that the governor of Texas at the time, who I think would have been Rick Perry, was maybe Greg Abbott at that point.
No, but, it was Rick Perry.
Said, I'm putting our National Guard on alert, so that we're prepared if Obama tries to arrest Republicans, we're going to step in and defend Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, Ted Cruz was talking about. I think Louis Gohmert said something on the floor of the House, right? About that.
It certainly seems believable. I mean, it really was one of these sort of early inroads where even Republican leaders were latching onto it.
So where are the Republican leaders on this now? Like, like McCarthy doesn't seem to have any problem. Like, how much do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene actually believes in Q? Or is she? Has she gone over to? Huh?
Yeah,
she's deep in, right? I mean, she's for real. she's just laying low right now because she knows that she can't do this. But do you think that she still has is she still the same Q fanatic that she was? She just realizes I've got to button this up a little bit.
I think that's right. I mean, we can compare the two kind of pro-Q Congress members of Congress who got elected in I guess 2020. The Lauren Boebert, who definitely kind of nodded to QAnon and I think saw them as a base of voters she didn't want to alienate, but who only is on the record once saying, so they're like, oh, Q, that's sort of interesting. I hope they're right, which is a crazy thing to say. But then you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is deep, deep, deep. I mean, if you look at her Facebook posts, and not just in conspiracy theories, but in terms of Q in general, she's debating which Q drops are legitimate with this kind of Talmudic intensity. She's really getting into it. And so the idea now that she's like, oh, I guess I posted the wrong hashtag. No way. I mean, she was in.
I gotta also say, then, since we just spoke about Alex Jones, another way you could view QAnon is the marriage of the birtherism and the rise of conspiracy theories about mass shootings, which she also engaged in, which is crisis actors and things that they're not telling you. I mean, that also feeds into this kind of frenzy where the internet now became this almost Frankenstein monster where this stuff became self-creating at this point, and whenever Q hit its apex.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I mean, she was deep into this false flag stuff, and QAnon and all these conspiracy theories is sort of a way to avoid seeing what's obvious. So, which is to say, oh, are there too many guns in America? Is it too easy to get guns? No, it must be a false flag, or I look at all these people who get into QAnon because they have all these debts and they've been promised that their debts will be relieved if QAnon happens. And then should they say, well, is it messed up that I am so in debt just because I got ill? No, it must be the cabal's fault.
Interesting. I don't think it's going to get better.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sam. On one hand, I think in 2022 there were a lot of QAnon people on the ballot who lost. There was a whole QAnon coalition led by one of the JFK Juniors to sort of seize control of elections in battleground states, and they all lost. So that's positive.
That is positive, but I'm thinking, I feel like the trajectory is not necessarily a rosy. I don't think this gets better. I really don't. But Will Sommer, the book is The Plan, The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America. I am afraid that you're going to have an opportunity to write a sequel, but I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we'll put a link to the plan at
Trust the Plan.
Trust the Plan at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Also, don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. During the break, we will put up a what do you call it? A QR code.
QR code, yep.
Then you'll be able to just click on that and go and join the show and allow the show to survive and thrive. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out the AM Quickie. Send you an email with the daily news to your email box, amquickie.com. Emma, what's happening in the world of ESPN?
Well, as of an hour ago, legal tampering period for the NFL is opened. Aaron Rodgers still hasn't made a decision, leaving the Jets completely in the dark, so to speak. When he went on that darkness retreat, we'll see if he makes a choice. Plus, I want to dive into the very complex labor dynamics behind the issue with Lamar Jackson's contract and what collusion really means in terms of teams not choosing to pursue him despite his non-exclusive tag, and also March Madness very soon. We'll be talking all about that on youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt Leck Media.
This weekend, David and I talked to Ange from Australia about running in electoral politics, as well as look back at Randy Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg's sister. A year ago, she was doing the We're All Gonna Make It song. I don't know if you remember that, Sam. Some of us can't forget it. And now she's doing business relief for COVID-affected businesses. So didn't all make it in crypto. No. We were not able to carpe our crypto DMs. But And tomorrow, Dwayne Monroe talking about AI on Left Reckoning, where we are about 200, I think, shy of either 25,000 or 30,000 subscribers. So,
whoa.
Anyway, whichever one we are, help us get to that milestone. Go subscribe at YouTube Left Reckoning.
Folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Folks, we will get to your calls in a little bit. We'll take your IMs. If you have the app and you are a member, you can IM us. Katie Porter, back when Dodd-Frank was being fashioned, Katie Porter was, I believe, she was not in academic, but she was involved in banking in some way. And I know she was like writing about this stuff. I think she had worked under, or she had studied under Elizabeth Warren. And here is Katie Porter posting a video to Twitter explaining how, not so much how the Silicon Valley Bank got to this point, but how it got to this point without regulators knowing about it. There's two elements to this. The stuff that SBV did that was messed up, and the stuff that Congress and Trump did that essentially said, we're not going to look at the stuff you're doing until you reach a certain threshold.
When we talk about who's ultimately responsible, sadly, one of the answers here is Congress. And here's why. In 2017, after Trump was elected, a group of senators decided they wanted to weaken the banking laws that were put into place after the last financial crisis. And so there was a bill, it's called Senate Bill 2155. And it was named for the Idaho senator that pushed for it, the Crapo bill. And what it did was say, the very biggest banks, you have to keep a lot of cushion in case there's a problem. But this next batch of big banks, we're going to make you keep less cushion. We're going to loosen the capital holding requirement, the cushion that you have to have. And at the time, a number of people, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, I was a law professor at the time, just a candidate for Congress. I posted sent out a press release on this. I posted on Twitter about this. I said, don't do it. Don't loosen the capital holding requirements for these banks. I know they look medium size compared to Wells Fargo and Bank of America, but they are still huge banks that could destroy our ecosystem, like cause real contagion and real problems in the financial system. But lo and behold, Republicans didn't listen, and a lot of Democrats didn't listen either. And there were like 10 or 15 Democrats who voted with Republicans to weaken the capital holding requirements on these medium-sized, so-called medium-sized banks. As we're seeing with Silicon Valley Bank, even a so-called medium-sized bank is huge and can cause all kinds of problems.
So there it is. I mean, look, there are two stories here, right? There's what was going on at this bank and banks like it that put it in jeopardy. But at the end of the day, that's just a story for business reporters if we still have the regime that existed in 2017, because it does not become such a big problem because the FDIC steps in beforehand. Something's flagged. You don't get away with this stuff. And here we are.
Yeah. They didn't have because they said that, we're too small. This is too burdensome on us. You shouldn't be treating us like we're a big bank. Don't subject us to these liquidity requirements or to this kind of increased oversight, these checks. Just trust us. And Republicans and 17 Democrats were happy to do it. And here we are. And that paired with the Fed interest rate hikes, which, makes sense that he's basically a bipartisan Fed chair as well, Powell.
Right. Let's look at this. These two tweets I thought were pretty funny. This is Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale bought an ad to promote, basically promoted his tweet. Just
Palantir is Peter Thiel's sort of private spy firm.
Right. I mean, this is just like all these libertarian crew out in Silicon Valley. So embarrassing to buy a promoted tweet in this way. It seems to me. Like, I can get it. Like, if you have like a business and you promote the business, but like, I've got some deep thoughts that I think really deserve to be seen.
You just don't have the cash, so you wouldn't even understand what it's like to pay for promotional.
I would pay for it. Yeah, if I had that type of money, I would.
In the battle of ideas, you have to have the cash to get your ideas at the forefront.
Exactly. Joe Lonsdale. I am curious if the innovation world is only part of our economy that doesn't deserve a depositor bailout.
Innovation world.
I'm part of the innovation world. But first off, like, who the innovation world did get a bailout in the form of like the PPP. Mm-hmm. All of those businesses, got their beaks wet, as it were. Presumably anybody who is a parent in the innovation world also got the $300 per child.
And like the cheap money policies since the Obama era have been one long bailout of these people.
Without a doubt. And then he goes on to say, and can't help but ask, how many equivalent aid packages to Ukraine? Half of them? No, half of one of them it takes to resolve the crisis impacting thousands of promising U.S. technology companies.
Promising's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
I mean, if it's
there.
only thousands, we can take them on a case-by-case basis, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean.
But it's fascinating to me. What you also get to see here is you see where, like, you know, that tech bro world when they're talking about Ukraine. Like, I mean, he doesn't. How much of Palantir's revenue is a function of the national security state? Like, is it 110%? No, because you have corporate
well, yeah, a good chunk of it is helping police stations spy on citizens, get around constitutional.
I would include that in there, right?
Yeah.
And internationally. So this is not a concern that he's not concerned about authoritarianism. He's not concerned about war, frankly. He's just looking for the most cynical way to generate support for these people who put over $250,000 per person or business and did not avail themselves. Let's also be clear. If you're a small business that needs to maintain more than $250,000 in your bank account at any time for payroll purposes, there are secondary insurers for this. Mm-hmm. There are mechanisms in which you can insure that money. But again, the reason why they didn't protect that money above $250,000 was because they're getting a sweetheart deal from the bank on either their personal mortgages or their personal loans or their business loans to capitalize them. And they're getting all sorts of amenities. This is put $100 in, get a free toaster. Except for them, it's like, go over the threshold in which you're federally insured and you'll get all of these benefits in terms of financial measures. I mean, and to be fair, that's somewhat speculative on my part, but I'm quite convinced that's what's going on here.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's also, this is the natural kind of end point to this tech bubble kind of bumping up against its ceiling, where there's just not anything there anymore. And so that's why there's these big tech layoffs.
It's AI. It's going to change the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're in the metaverse now. There's not they're
kept afloat by cheap money.
Well, but the need for endless growth is not compatible right now with
your anti-innovation.
the tech industry.
And they need that growth because they have promised it to investors.
And it's being propped up by stilts by these, again, speculation sweetheart deals with banks that are also getting rich off of it, and were underregulated because of the bipartisan bill passed under Trump.
So anti-innovative. But Joe Lonsdale, it's an interesting twist because just like a year ago, in December of 2022, I guess actually 3 months ago, in a free society, Joe Lonsdale wrote in a non-promoted tweet. In a free society with property rights and checks on government power, poverty is generally a cultural problem.
Hello, Charles Murray.
That is, it's mostly tied to bad choices. It's a bad choice. Putting more than $250,000 in a bank because you're getting some other benefits for it and you're willing to take that risk. That's a bad choice.
Got to feel the consequences of that.
Let's go
back. Is that a classical virtue?
Bad choices, bad habits, lack of inculcating classical virtues. You know what's a classical virtue? I'll tell you what it is, a classical virtue. That is not be greedy. And just take the interest rates you're getting there, and instead of not be so risky with your finances that you're willing to put money in a bank beyond the threshold in which is federally insured, which is $250,000 everywhere. Everybody knows this who has that kind of money. You don't have that kind of money and not know that. and then say, I'll be fine. That seems to me to be a non-classical virtue and misguided basic ways of thinking about and understanding the world. In other words, one could say, that can't happen to me. I'm a master of the universe. My bank won't collapse. I'm just going to get my 0% mortgage. They get, I don't know if like these people all got it, but like if you have enough money and you keep it with, let's say, in this instance, a commercial bank or sometimes investment bank, they will get you like 0% mortgages where you're just getting the money for free. And you're like, your house cost, I don't know, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million. You borrow the money at 0% interest. You keep that $20 million in, I don't know, whatever investment vehicle that it wants, because all it needs to do is return 1%. And your house is free.
Yeah. It's actually quite easy to be a rich person that stays rich, because once you're wealthy, then you get a bunch of sweetheart deals because people want to be doing business with you.
When I first got on All American Girl, as it made more money in that 1 week than I had made in the year before. And they came to me and they started giving me free sneakers. And I'm like, where were you when I wasn't making this money?
Right.
But that's the way it goes, folks.
I still can't believe how I can get books for free because of my job.
Yeah.
And if you had told me this when I was 20, I'm like, holy crap. It's like
there you go.
Hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah.
Let's go into actually one note on Katie Porter, because we haven't really talked about this, but she has been doing outreach she went on a trip with a bunch of other Democrats and, among other things, met with Netanyahu.
Yep.
And I do think it'd be nice to throw a little bit of chin music. Like, that stuff is not acceptable. And her project there needs to be nipped in the bud.
I mean, it is incredibly cynical. And it is clearly like, how does she avoid the AIPAC onslaught that she knows that it's coming?
It's fine to pivot to being a little bit more pro-Israel to stave that off. Not acceptable to be singing Netanyahu's praises specifically.
Super gross.
She did not need to go that far. And I think that people should seriously consider Barbara Lee in that primary. But I'm not in California, but that's just something to note. And also, I do think that the reports about how she treats her staff are another piece of information that you can take.
To Nancy Mace, the Republican problem solvers, this is. I even wonder if she does this. Who did we hear this from the other day about the same plan? This is the way.
Nikki Haley?
Was it Nikki Haley? Yeah. This is like
South Carolinians. Yeah.
There is an attempt here to hold the middle, and the middle. Let's be clear when we talk about this. Wants to cut your Social Security, and why do they want that? Because they want. Well, there's two things they want. They want to cut your Social Security because they want a lot of this money to slide into the stock market, because the stock market, we know, is owned by something like 20% of the country, broadly speaking. There may be some, but 80% of the stocks are owned by 20% of the people in this country. So for lack of, a better term, it's like, the top 10%. And, or I guess the top 20%. I mean, that's definitionally. And the way that you keep the market afloat is by having a bunch of money in there. I mean, people sell and get out of the market, prices go down. They want this money in there. And of course, all the stockbrokers want it too, because it's dumb money. And if you cut Social Security, there'll be movements maybe to privatize parts of the remaining parts of Social Security, or more money will go into the failed experiment of 401ks. And the way that they want to cut and the way that they try and deal with cuts to Social Security being so toxic electorally is they say, well, no one over the age of 50, let's say, will get cuts to Social Security. But young people who are not paying attention to it, they'll have no Social Security. And I just want to make one thing clear. The reason why people who are retiring today have Social Security is because the program started years ago. In other words, like, if you're young, you should understand that someday you're going to be old, and that's when Social Security will be important to you. Do not let them cut it. Here is Nancy Mace trying to make this argument.
I want to ask you about something your fellow South Carolinian, Nikki Haley, said. Obviously, she is running for president in 2024. She said this week that she supports raising the retirement age for people who are in their 20s when it comes to receiving Social Security benefits. Do you agree with her on that?
I think that's something that has to be on the table. We have to look at. I'm 45 years old. I'm assuming that Social Security will be insolvent, that I won't have retirement funds from what I put into.
Pause it. Well, what she should do is ask one of her staffers to look into this.
Mm-hmm.
Because at age 45, if nothing is done, she will still receive 75% of her benefits. Social Security is not going to be insolvent. The trust fund, if nothing is done, will be insolvent. She will still get 75%. Could be a little bit more. That's a conservative estimate. 75% of her benefits. So her plan is, let's cut it for some people so that I don't get cuts to mine.
Everyone's got to take a haircut.
Has to be on the table. We have to look at. I'm 45 years old. I'm assuming that Social Security will be insolvent, that I won't have retirement funds from what I put into in my adult life, my working life. We do have to look at Social Security. We've got to look at our spending in this country, mandatory and discretionary. If we're going to take on fixing the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you name it, we've got to get serious about it.
We got to cut it to save it.
You do support potentially raising the age to maybe extend the
as long as it's not anybody that's heading into retirement right now. We do not want to take away those that are in retirement or those that are heading into retirement. But if we're talking about younger generations, my kids, for example, if they know what the retirement will look like 40 years from now, 50 years from now, then that should be on the table and can be. We have to. Both Republicans and Democrats have screwed this thing up, and they've got to fix it.
Yeah, we want to cut it. We want to cut it, but we just don't want the political blowback from it. So everybody else is going to bear the brunt of it. And we have to get really serious, which is why I will refuse to consider the only solution in this way, which is like raising taxes in order to ensure that this would never happen. When they say get serious, they mean they want austerity. That's what that means.
Glizzy McGuire says, Sam, you say the failed experiment of 401k. What do you mean? Should I not contribute to my 401k? No. I'm saying that it was an experiment. Can we support the retirement of millions and millions and millions of people by shifting away from the defined benefit model of pensions into the defined contribution model? Defined benefit means I'm definitely getting this much when I am older.
Mm-hmm.
Defined contribution means I've got to pay in this much. We know if you look at the statistics, all you got to do is Google like the success of 401ks. Don't look at the individual. I'm talking about in terms of like generations and groups of people. People take money out of their 401ks when they're in a financial crisis. They put less money in than they should put it in. They mismanage it. All of these things. It is a failed experiment to essentially privatize parts of social insurance. And regardless of what Nancy Mace's 20-year-old kids think, or 15-year-old kids, they're not planning for a retirement. People don't plan for retirement until they get just old enough where they can barely do it if they're making enough money. That's why Social Security keeps about 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. And it not only keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty, it also reduces the burden on their kids. Because it's done automatically. And it's a defined benefit program.
401ks and IRAs lost $2.4 trillion during the final 2 quarters of 2008 too. I mean,
My parents worked longer because of that.
It's subject.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's two sets of problems, right? I mean, if you have the money in the stock market, your retirement is going to be a function of where's the stock market at that point. I mean, you could say like it's going to grow 10% a year, over the course of 30 years. Well, that's great unless you're in your early 60s in 2005, and then you're screwed and you're going to be working for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But that's just one set of problems. The other set, even the bigger one, is that people don't fund them properly. They're losing money on fees. They take money out and borrow against it and can't repay it because somebody got sick.
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, half the country is a paycheck away from basically, increased incredible financial precarity. Of course, those things are not going to be, or 401ks are not going to be completely stable. People are going to need to draw from them at some point. That's why the universality of public programs are so important.
Social insurance, folks. Don't let them cut your Social Security. In fact, expand it. Raise the cap and expand the benefits. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number. We will take your phone calls as well as your IMs. And here is an IM right now. Sam's tight pants. In response to Pence's weekend comments, history will hold Trump accountable. History holds no one to account.
Yeah.
History merely shines a light on those too cowardly or powerless to hold the morally depraved to account.
Isn't that what Ford said about Nixon, too?
Yeah. Pence is certainly the former, not the latter. What a morally vapid charlatan. There's two things going on with Pence with that. One, Emma made this point earlier, no cameras at the gridiron where he said this. So only the people really looking for him to say this are going to be saying he can't be using a commercial against him. Donald Trump would be like, well, as long as he doesn't do it on TV, it doesn't matter. I had to read it. I didn't know. I was aware of it. The other thing is, this is completely a fundamentalist. He's not talking about history. He's talking about the afterlife.
God.
And God. And that is going to be sufficient. That is almost like the worst thing you could, it doesn't matter what we do here on this planet, ladies and gentlemen, to Donald Trump, the January 6th. If you think January 6th was bad and you are one of my Christian fundamentalist followers, and I say history will take care of it, what I really mean, as you know, is that God will take care of it. It'll all get sorted out. And that is far worse than anything that I could do. So,
isn't that so ironic too when you hear about the moral failing of America and people falling away from religion and how the left, they're hedonistic and they have no connection to like the family and traditional morality. When you're that far gone and you're a right-wing evangelical, your moral code is basically determined as the ends justify the means when you're here on this planet, and you can do whatever you need to do to serve God. But the left is untethered from morality. It's like crazy. I mean, that's what Pence's entire backing of Trump was he is an imperfect vessel for Jesus, for God. Donald Trump, he's uncouth, but I'm going to back him because the ends justify the means. He will get into office. He will deliver for the evangelicals with the court system. And he literally did that with Roe v. Wade.
He did.
So from Mike Pence's perspective, there's absolutely no incongruence there.
None. Well, he also doesn't believe in anything.
I know, but it just it's something to note when we're talking about right-wing kind of projection. Like they're untethered from a moral code because they have a belief in something that, like is larger than.
Well, they don't need a moral code.
Well, yeah, right.
Because God will
yes.
is they have a religious code. That's where, in fact, that's their argument. I mean, Prager has made this argument many times. Without religion, there is no moral code. Calling from a 632 area code. No, wait, 632. Oh, where did I get that? 626.
Hey, is this me?
Yeah, it is you.
Hey, awesome. First time caller, long time listener. This is Lulu from Philadelphia.
Lulu from Philadelphia. What's on your mind?
I'm just trying to understand this whole SVB bailout thing a little more. Because it seems very hypocritical from the government's end, where there's, a lot of, they could be helping out, forgiving student loans, helping out homeless people and all this kind of stuff, but they make such big excuses for that. But as soon as something like this happens, they immediately come to the rescue,
Well, there's an argument that it's not taxpayer dollars, which I don't think is really terribly relevant. I mean, they've figured out where to get the money. It's supposedly going to be like loans from the Fed and from Treasury, and that it's supposedly going to get all repaid back by when they sell the company, and nobody's got time to vet the bank. But yes, and the real hypocrisy comes in because you don't need one or the other to do that. The real hypocrisy comes in with this notion of moral hazard. The bottom line is nobody, why should these banks get this special one-off where everybody else has been subject and everybody else going forward and everybody else at a different bank subject to a $250,000 limit on what is federally insured? Why do these banks get a special little bonus here? And to be clear, the reason why people had their money in there was not in any way ignorance. It was because they were getting benefits from it. So they get to keep the benefits, and the supposed risk associated with that has been completely removed.
Hello?
Yeah, no, totally. Just a little nervous, but I mean, I don't know. Some could say that, when people take out student loans, for example, it's like, oh, I'm investing in myself, so why am I taking on all the associated risk?
Yeah, I mean, I without a doubt. I mean, people could say that there is an equivalence there, and there may be. Maybe there may be. I mean, maybe one could argue when we took the capital controls off of banks of this size, it was a huge mistake, and it's society set up a structure that was incorrect, and we need to fix that. And so now we have an opportunity to fix that structure, and we'll make the depositors whole. Should be the same reason with student loans. Now, to be clear, student loans are going to run into a problem with the Supreme Court, in which case you would never see that problem for bankers because the Supreme Court would never even entertain a case about that. Nobody has standing. No, who's harmed? Nobody's harmed. But it's more of the moral scold argument that we hear all the time. Appreciate the call.
For sure. Thank you.
Fox News. Any mention of the Chinese-led Saudi-Iran talks and the possible connection with the Willow Project? I
don't know about the latter part, but I do want to dive. I'm going to try to see if we can have someone on for 15, 20 minutes on Thursday to talk about that.
That would be good. The guy from The Nation that I interviewed.
All right. Well,
he might be good.
I'll look into it. Yeah.
Yep. On the boat. Vermont Ben. After this conversation, I decided to check my 401k on a whim. Why does my 401k administrator show a retirement age of 67? Well, I guess you got some new plans, buddy. Centrist Democrats who despise the left flank of the party for critiquing their policy inclinations betray their true intentions when their wealthy donors bang the table for deregulation. Let's read the name of the Democrats or the Democratic caucusing independents in the Senate who voted to roll back provisions in Dodd-Frank.
I could do it right now if you want.
McCaskill.
Mm-hmm. I alphabetically. I could go Bennett, Carper, Coons, Donnelly. This is hard. Hassan, Heitkamp, no longer in the Senate. Jones, no longer there. Manchin, McCaskill, as you say. Nelson, Peters. Sorry, this is hard to see. Warner. But you guys get the picture. You can look it up. The left.
Well, I'll do it here. McCaskill, Tester,
Yeah.
Warner, King, Donnelly. Donnelly's gone. He was from Indiana. Peters from Michigan, right? Gone.
Mm-hmm.
Stab.
No, he's still there.
Peters still there. Stabenow. She's leaving, right? Did she announce?
She's retiring.
That's, yeah.
Coons. Carper. That's what I confused with Crapo. Heitkamp. Shaheen. Hassan. Kane. Manchin. Bennett. Nelson. Bennett's still there. Nelson.
Yeah.
I mean, Nelson's gone. And Jones. I mean, all the people you would imagine. But you know what? I mean, like, think about this. Today,
Angus King.
you would get Tester. You would get everybody who's still in office, I would imagine, would vote for that today. But nobody else. I don't think. Warner maybe, but Warner was on that list.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Warner definitely.
Nick in Japan. I was disappointed to hear about Biden bailing out SVB's wealthiest clients without using it as leverage to advance any of his supposed agenda. I don't know what he's going to leverage there. From whom? Josh from Tucson. I mean, it would be a good opportunity to push for increased banking regulation. Maybe you get that through the House. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, I appreciate, like, the I told you so-ness of, like, the Bernie statement and stuff like that, but it'd be nice to move to this is a hostage situation.
Right. Why do all you other states have to continue this barbaric practice of daylight savings time? Everyone should move to Arizona, where drive-in theaters successfully argued to the government to get rid of it. I almost missed the start of the show because you started an hour earlier for me. I'll tell you something. And it gets worse as I get older. And also it's worse because my kids.
I mean, I don't even feel like myself at all today because it's just like.
My thing is, like, I really like it in the fall, and then in the spring I'm like, damn, this sucks.
Yeah, wow.
Is the left
just keep falling back?
Is
That's
left
the
really
synchronicity.
best? Yes. Is the economy collapsing again, Sam? No, it is not. New Jersey mailman. Another thing about Cop City shooting, we still have no idea if the gun they found on the tree defender was even shot. If they did test the gun, they haven't released the findings. Indeed, blue-haired cows. The collapse of SVB represents yet another failure of the Biden administration to reverse a Trump-era rollback. Incidentally, the rollback was bipartisan in Congress, with both Delaware senators voting in favor. I mean, I suppose, yes, Biden could have used his political cachet to attempt to get that, and Joe Manchin would have killed that. But I get your point. Carly Scheer, the Silicon Valley collapse sounds awfully similar to the subprime loan bubble, to be honest. Well, only to the extent that, like, interest rates went up and these people didn't react to it. If I default on my mortgage, I'm just going to tell the bank work is too woke and I'm reading too much critical race theory to pay attention to my payments. I'm sure that'll work and get me a bailout. Lux. Star Fox in the Discord asked me to test the IMs are working on Android. If you see this during the interview, I would note the groundwork of the adrenochrome being the elites coming for your children played a direct through line for the trans panic ongoing. Yeah, Emma made that point. Serious business. Listening to Comer, it's just perfect evidence that the Republicans will elect any idiot in a suit. Frank Bluntz. Imagine being on a coke bender reading Q. Put this man on Rogan.
Oh my God, the level of paranoia is like you're paranoid already if you're into QAnon and then you're on coke.
Come up, Link. Happy Fun Day Monday. Here in Britain, it's been announced that the King's younger brother, Prince Edward, will assume the title Duke of Edinburgh.
Wow.
Title
exciting.
held by their father, Prince Philip. Again, very normal stuff. LOL. One of the things that shocked me about the Queen's death was how the MAGA brigade stand the British Empire. U.S. conservatives are fine with British imperialism as long as it doesn't apply to them. Also, on the topic of the Oscars,
so weird, yeah.
2010 Invictus had 2 nominations. You can probably guess what my take is on that.
You should look at James and the Duke of Buckingham and a lot of monarchical sort of Catholic / conspiracies stuff going on. And some salaciousness as well.
Oliver Twist. Sam, when your son inevitably picks the bathroom door lock during the 20-minute dad time, do you think you're going to be more proud or upset? I'll be pretty proud of that. Are you kidding? Rave Dubin. If the U.S. government is basically purchasing all of these individual accounts previously held by SVB, postal banking should be created and manage all of them. Gageson. Seems to me that being too woke really means not too corrupt. Let's get to the phones. Calling from a 757 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, you boomer jabroni.
Yes.
It's Amir.
Amir.
From Virginia.
From Virginia. What's on your mind?
So, I've actually been meaning to call in about the very topic that you discussed today with Will. I followed his work pretty closely because my mom is like deep into the QAnon stuff. But one thing that I didn't hear mentioned is kind of like, so a little background, she's originally from Egypt. And one thing I didn't hear mentioned, or maybe it was, but it went by me, was the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Yeah. No, it didn't. It didn't. I mean, we talked about the blood libel, but not the protocol. We only had so much time to deal with the rampant anti-Semitism and involved in it.
Exactly, and that's really at the heart of it, at least from like my perspective when like having discussions with her, because she's not like an evangelical, you know, she was like raised in Egypt, but one thing that she did do was hang on every word that her father ever told her. And so when I asked her, like, what is this cabal that you're referring to? Who is it? What is it? She can never give me a definitive answer, but she will always go back to that story of when I was a kid, my father told me about basically the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And so when and another thing is, you know, the rise of like high-speed internet. Like, I feel like they should have never given these old people internet, because she just kind of like goes wild on there. Like, she doesn't really know how to like search properly. And so she just kind of goes and finds the things that, you know, like conservatives do, like that just confirm her own biases. So when she, so basically when internet came along and like she was basically like, and then later with QAnon, she was basically like confirming the very thing that her father, which she revered, told her like a long time ago. Like, and so there's definitely a relationship between you know, anti-Semitism and but also like you guys were alluding to, like the kind of end of days stuff, you know, like.
Does your mother
So anyway,
does your mother associate those stories with anti-Semitism? Like, is she aware that it's Jews?
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
So it was more
Not at
just
all.
sort of like the structure of the cabal rather than the sort of like who is in it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know if that's as much of a denial because she doesn't want to be portrayed
Right.
as like anti-Semitic, or if it's just like she's just completely, you know, unaware that like, hey, this document was like a forgery that came out of Russia, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Like, not even a real document.
Right.
Yeah.
The protocols of the Elders of Zion. So like. So the entire worldview is based on a lie from like 60 years ago, and she's just now like kind of finding it, and I mean, it's really disturbing. But I mean, the one way I deal with it, I don't try to really, I just like use ridicule. Ridicule is basically the best way, in my opinion, to challenge,
ridiculing people,
propositions, ridiculing the ideas.
I mean, I'm all for that. I don't know how much that minds that changes on like a micro level, but I mean, deserves to be ridiculed. I understand.
Oh, I certainly subscribe to that idea. I'm
sorry to cut you off, but to be quite frank, I can't help myself.
I understand.
I can't not. Like, if somebody says something stupid, I'm going to call it stupid, right?
Yeah.
And, she was a Rush Limbaugh listener. So all of that, all of the entire discussion was just like, wow, this is like the past 20 years of my life. And that's how I actually found you, Sam, was like way back in the day. Cause I started getting political, when I was around 19 or 20 at the start of the Iraq war. And I mean, you remember at the time, there were very few people who were anti-war voices. The majority of the country was like all in on war and stuff. And my mom was like an avid Rush Limbaugh listener, avid Fox News, Mark Levin, all that kind of nonsense. So when I found you, I was like, oh man, this is like exactly what I was looking for, because I needed a way to maybe even confirm my own biases, but I needed a way to combat this insanity that was going on around me. So anyway, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
That really has helped out. The random Rush stuff, that all was great. When are you going to have Janine back on? Do a little.
I'm going to do that soon. I was thinking about that the other day, actually. I
want to hear Samuel.
Catherine Harris.
Samuel.
All right, Amir. Appreciate the phone call, man.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Take care.
Speaking of like the conspiracy theorists, the interesting thing about the idea of like how much does this conspiracy theory sort of mode and like the big lie, like I don't even know how Trump is going to deal with this so much from a position of like not being in power if he's running as president. If you're going to make the argument that the election was rigged in 2020 or in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
How do you convince people to even bother to vote? Like, what do you say? Like, I couldn't protect your vote in 2020, but now, because I'm working in the private sector, I can protect your vote.
Look, they wouldn't do it twice.
They wouldn't do it. Yeah. I mean, why would they do it twice? That is the dilemma that Charlie Kirk faced, and let's see how he handled this.
I'm sure really well.
TPUSA conference in Chicago, Illinois.
I listen to your show all the time, and I want to thank you for standing up against the woke Democrat mafia here in Chicago. It's so important, and for saying the truth that the 2016 election was rigged, it was stolen, and that is why.
2020. You said 16.
Was that? 2016, right?
No, 20.
Oh, 2020. I'm sorry. No, I'm so nervous, Charlie. I'm so excited to speak to you. I'm so sorry.
Incidentally, we should say that Donald Trump won in 2016.
Yeah.
That's why Charlie Kirk is like, no, it was a new thing. The election was rigged when Donald Trump was president, not when he was not president.
I like
2020.
16.
Yes, the 2020 election was rigged. It was stolen. It was It was stolen, right? And I want to thank you for standing up for that. And that's why when the 2022 elections came around, I told all of my friends and family, I said, there's only one way to stop this woke Democrat mafia, and that is to boycott these elections, because they're never going to hear us if we don't really stop from participating in their lie. It's a farce. It's a farce. And why should we participate? You said it yourself. Why should we participate?
Okay.
All right, pause it for 1 second. Now, deep down, I think, like, is this guy just
a plant?
A plant?
Yeah.
But I don't think he is. I don't think he is. But the amazing thing that when I hear this is just sort of like, I mean, I want people to just sit with how insane that sounds as a tool
strategy.
As a strategy. I'm not going to participate. And we've shown them.
Yeah, because there is a sort of
There is a parallel
Yes.
to this magical thinking that exists on our side. That somehow, if like enough, we will teach them a lesson. In fact, that we heard
It'll shame them. With
we
a lack
heard
of votes.
we heard
They need to
people,
earn our vote. Yeah,
we
right.
heard and look, they do need to earn the vote.
I know.
But if you're savvy enough to go to a TPUSA thing and you're out there advocating for all your friends to not vote because that's going to show up the woke Democrats
because they'll care.
You don't understand how things work.
Yeah.
You have a fundamental misconception on how things work. How many people did we hear from in 2016 who were like, how do we teach the Democrats a lesson? There's only one way. And that is if Clinton loses.
Yeah.
We don't come out and vote. Like, if you're not going to come out and vote, right? What is that supposed to do? That's supposed to make the candidate that's being foisted on you lose so that you teach them a lesson.
Right.
Well, their plan worked. Now, I'm not saying that they did it, but the outcome they wanted happened. Of course, there were no lessons learned other than we need to tack more towards like someone who is like more amenable to people in the center.
Yeah.
In this case, it was Joe Biden.
Let's go with the safest option possible.
Safest option possible. And of course, all those people who said, this is our plan, said, well, it wasn't because of what we did. Well,
to be clear, Jimmy Dore said it would lead to us electing Elizabeth Warren and as the primary.
Yes, but he wasn't the only one. There was a lot of people who said like, this is going to bring about a revolution. It's going to move things to the left. It's just not the way it works. At least it's not the way it's worked following Reagan's era, following George W. Bush's era, and following Donald Trump's era.
Nixon or Ford.
Right, and Nixon Ford era, right? You got Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not the way that it works. I wish it was, but it's not. Anyways, let's hear this.
If we don't really stop from participating in their lie, it's a farce. It's a farce. And why should we participate? You said it yourself. Why should we participate?
Okay, let me tell you why. So I love the energy. You buttered me up perfectly, right? But I got to disagree. It is not rational to stop engaging in the civic process that decides who is in charge. Hold on. Even if it is, hold on, let's 1 second. Even if it is rigged, okay? Even if it is rigged, going through a tradition of voting at least opens an opportunity, a chance, a micron that you actually might still be able to have representative government. What you are doing, respectfully, is a guarantee that you'll never have a voice.
That's true, but that's not something that you can sell to a base when you've said that the entire electoral system is rigged against you.
I don't think his explanation, I don't think it's going to be effective, to the extent he's going to change any minds. But I also think that it doesn't work that way. That's not what, they don't care if voter participation is 5%.
They would love it.
Then all they need to do is go out and convince, 2.6% of the people.
Both corporate cores of each party would love it if less people were engaged in politics.
But for them, it's even more dire because less people are engaged with the Republican Party by numbers alone. They are a minoritarian party. On the national level, there are more people that vote Democratic, more Democratic.
Yeah.
So this kind of shit along the margins actually really does affect them. And how this is, I really don't know the answer, but I'm wondering how this affects the general election if Trump's the nominee or if he's not the nominee. Like, are these election deniers way more likely to sit? If it's ugly, they're
in the primary. It's a problem for the Republicans.
Like, I mean, honestly, right now, I don't know what Biden's going to do, but the Democrats on a presidential race level are fairly well positioned because if Trump is the nominee, he's going to bring out a lot of people to vote against him. If he's not the nominee, where did these election rigging claims fall in terms of voter turnout for a general election for a non-Trump nominee?
I would say that there is a 100% chance that if Trump is not the nominee, that he's going to keep his people away from the polls. Unless he runs
as a third party, which either way, though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. I don't know if we have any audio associated, but we should talk about this Willow Project. The Willow Project has been this sort of like aspiration of ConocoPhillips for years. It is an $8 billion project, or at least as presented, led by ConocoPhillips. It will have the potential to produce more than 600 million barrels of crude oil over 30 years. That essentially produces enough carbon pollution that would be equivalent to nearly 2 million cars on the road each year. You'll remember, do we have a clip of Joe Biden saying, not on federal land? Biden, there were people in the Biden administration who were against this vehemently. He was lobbied by obviously the oil industry and all the Alaska
indigenous communities,
lawmakers, including Patola,
sorry,
the Democratic congresswoman. There were some indigenous communities that were like, we don't want this here because they're so close to it. There were others who were like, we want this. Unions were in support of it. But it's amazing to me, like it's based on like 2,500 jobs, $17 billion in revenue for the federal government. I imagine there's also some that would come directly to the state. Let's just pay for it.
Right.
Or those kinds of jobs could be, and what I meant was that there were indigenous water protectors opposing it, is what I meant to say.
Have the government hire everybody.
But this is what like, the purpose of a Green New Deal is supposed to be, which is to create jobs, but not doing this crap.
Right.
Yeah. We could do the PRO Act, or we could, destroy the planet some more. Who knows?
The interesting thing about this, it got a lot of play on TikTok. Like younger people were much more in tune with that this was being decided. I mean, we headlined it a couple of times over the past couple of weeks that it was coming down. The administration also rolled out some protections of restrictions on offshore oil leasing in the Arctic Ocean, the North Slope, et cetera, et cetera. That was, a way to sort of offset this decision. The administration apparently is going to approve permits for 3 drilling sites and deny 2 of the others, including one that would have been closest to a coastal wetland known as Teshek-Puk Lake. This is all unclear. I mean, this is all just sort of basically leaks from the administration at this point. ConocoPhillips wanted 5 drilling sites. They had said that if you don't do 5, it said the approval of 3 minimum 3 pads, the minimum number they would find acceptable. So that's what the administration did. ConocoPhillips said they will return 68,000 acres of existing leases back to the government to get this one. The Petroleum Reserve is 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. It's the country's largest single expanse of pristine land. This is what will be supposedly protected. It's a mess. There's some people out there who are saying, like, hopefully it's a cynical attempt to just sort of like approve it, get the political value from it, and hope that it just becomes too expensive for ConocoPhillips to do. But this is a big one. In addition to the new ban on Arctic drilling, the Interior Department will issue rules to protect more than 13 million of the 23 million acres in the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska, from oil and gas leasing. Pretty cynical, pretty gross. $17 billion and 2,500 jobs in terms of federal revenue. You should just take that off the table and just hire those 2,500 people. You'll probably make a decent amount of revenue just from the taxes on the people you hire. But there it is. Joe Biden capitulating to ConocoPhillips, and there were, again, there were people in the administration who were speaking out against this. Oh, this is an interesting clip. What clip is that? What clip are we? Which one? Oh, yeah. Here's Biden saying that, incidentally. I believe it was during the campaign. Here we go.
I just want to give him a chance to respond, and then we can come back.
Let's stay on.
We're staying on this issue.
Number one, no more subsidies for fossil fuel industry. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill. Period. Ends.
I don't think so.
Whoops.
Yep. Lion Joe.
What happened?
Malarkey Joe.
Hey, what happened?
There it is. Huge disappointment. We do seem to have a little bit of a global climate problem. And, the United States is the number 2 emitter. And you can hear all this talk about, well, it doesn't matter what we do if China doesn't do anything, which is A, not true. But B, why is this not a license to China or to anyone else? You guys...
We have to go first. I mean, we went first with regards to releasing this stuff into the atmosphere for hundreds of years.
Exactly.
100 years beforehand. So maybe we make the first move on
if
some
you
of this
guys can
stuff.
just do another 2 million cars, why can't we do another 2 million cars?
I mean, that's been the depressing sort of it's like toddlers arguing what you get to.
Yeah. Right.
And hasn't evolved beyond that since
Right.
I've graduated high school.
And it's ridiculous, though. It's ridiculous it's ridiculous for anyone to assume that another country would, how would this other country justify it? We need to cut emissions. America just made a deal to increase emissions. It's absurd. It's absurd. All right, let's have a little palate cleanser, shall we? This is actually a fascinating clip. I find this clip fascinating. This is clip number 7. It comes from a Santa Rosa County Commission hearing in Milton, Florida. And there's a Santa Rosa, I think he's just a resident, who is talking to the county commission, and he's calling out this guy, Sam Parker, who sits on the board. It's almost not even relevant. There's so much to be gleaned from this. That I think people should take note of, because we hear so many people complain about all these pronouns. It's too hard. Or why is there such wokeness, such sensitivity about words? I can't keep up. And I hear these people my age I can't keep up. I don't know what words now are inappropriate or not inappropriate. Even the context of jokes, whatever, it's a joke. I mean, it's a joke is also just sort of it's just a verb. It's just a word. It doesn't mean anything. God, why are people so sensitive? This moment really sort of, I think, provides a great illustration. Play this.
That's the real problem. You think you did nothing wrong. Your morals are very, very low. And you just used an ethnic slur joking around. Are you okay with that? You think the Jewish community is okay with what you said, Sam?
The fact that I walk in and say, hey, I'm going to have to Jew you down is not an ethnic slur. That has nothing to do. I'm not referring to the Jewish community. Okay, I use that term as an adjective, as a descriptive word of bargaining them down. The person I said it to knew it. I think you or anyone that's watching that knows that. So yes, that is not an ethnic slur. You can go in my office right now, and beside the American flag, I have the flag of Israel. That is not
beyond parody.
And I think you know that. So no, I'm not apologizing for that. I didn't say that towards any person or about any person.
I think a Jewish person would probably disagree with that being an ethnic slur.
Yeah. Now, all right, let's just dispense with the sort of all the accoutrement around here. The guy's a Christian Zionist. He doesn't, he got
That's why he has the Israeli flag, because he hopes all the Jews return so they get burned up, and then we get to be with Jesus.
To be fair, two-thirds.
Oh, yeah.
Two-thirds. There's a third of us that sit on the right-hand side of God. So that's not, if you get that seat, that's pretty good.
And they're the ones that, he agrees with, but go on. Yeah.
But what I find fascinating about this is that, and then let's also dispense with the fact that when you say Jew them down, it's not an adjective. It's a verb.
Yeah, come on.
But I don't want to get sidetracked by pedantry here or whatever it is. But this guy, I believe, I remember in college having a guy who was from New York say this to me. And I'm like, dude, are you serious? And he's like, what? And I'm like, I'm Jewish. And he goes, well, I didn't mean anything by it. And the thing is that for this guy, I think that he doesn't mean anything by it. For a long time, I've used phrases like off the reservation. Somebody IMs and says, dude, that's not appropriate. And it really had never occurred to me, but of course it's not. Or, you say gyp somebody. Or I don't know, there are others. But the point is this is just a really explicit illustration of this dynamic. Because this guy, I don't think that when he uses that term that he thinks that he's maligning Jewish people. It's just a verb that he learned. And
you're being way too generous.
No, I mean, he may or may not be a racist or an anti-Semite, but when he uses that word, I think that if he thought that it was anti-Semitic, he would be nervous in that moment, but he's up there defending it. And what he's defending is it is the ignorance and the refusal to sort of see any other perspective. It's almost like in the moment as he's explaining, he's starting to realize, wait a second, maybe it is.
No.
Maybe it is problematic. But my point is that we see this all the time where people are offended because they're being called out for being insensitive, for using a word that they didn't really make this association. And I think that this guy's here going you should know. That's a slur. And the guy's like, no, it's not. I'm not going to stop saying that. It's just an adjective, verb, or whatever it is, the thing that goes before a noun or whatever. And the most important part of this is not that some county supervisor in Milton, Florida, is some type of backward ass. The most important part is that people who their first reaction to being called out for saying something that is insensitive to another group or another person should stop for a moment and contemplate exactly what's going on. And this is just so obvious. But I got news for you. 40 years ago, it wouldn't have been obvious. 60 years ago, it wouldn't have been obvious. It probably wouldn't have come up. The guy would be saying hey guys, we're just we need more, water on the outskirts of town. And you allow me to go talk to the guy, I'll Jew him down. I'll get it down into a price range where it'll be acceptable to us.
Yeah. I mean, so do we know when he said that? Or is there video of him saying that?
He just said it right there.
Right, I understand. But before, when the guy confronted him and said, "You just said an ethnic slur." No,
I think it was probably in the same.
He said when he came in.
So when he was just walking in. So that's the thing is I think that there's a lot of people who are in very, very insulated communities who speak like this constantly, speak like this all the time, and their resentment is that they have to be two different people in public.
Well, but that's
that they cannot do when they're joking with their buddy behind the scenes about Jewing somebody down. They wish that they could say that in public, and so you get indignant when you're called out about it.
Dr. Shock says stand-up comedians and actors are playing roles and reflecting society through drama and comedy. Well, I mean, I get that. I mean, if you're playing a role, it's a different thing. But I'm saying the idea of ignoring, and you could argue in a different context, and this guy has a different responsibility, whatnot. But the real point here is the sensitivity that some people have to like being called out for saying something that they didn't realize was offensive. That's what this exhibits.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's two parts about it. I mean, I think people who are people need to, I think on some level, accept that there are some people who are just completely ignorant about certain things. Like it never occurred to me. Some sayings that I say never occurred to me. Some of them I had no idea what the etymology of these things were. But once it's explained, and the explainer should do the best that they can to sort of like give the benefit of the doubt to that person that they didn't know. Once it's explained, then it's on you.
Yeah.
Then you move from like a guy who doesn't know into that guy who once he's told is like, I refuse.
You activate
Change
chauvinist mode. Yep. I want to play this clip. This is from a Conan documentary, but a very similar thing happens where Conan's on the road and has to correct one of his fans for saying something like that. Go ahead, Brett.
Wrote my learners in the past 2 days ago. They took my ID card away. I'm just wondering if they're gonna Jew me and not let me in here.
If they're gonna what?
They're gonna jip me and not let me in here. And that would just not be cool after getting a ticket, and I've been really excited to see this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to look past the anti-Semitic remark.
I love Mel Gibson, dude.
Wow. Okay, now I don't think I want to let you in.
No.
How if you promise never to use that expression again?
Yeah, I promise.
Jeff Ross, can you come here for a sec? And I'm going to tell you something.
Jeff.
The producer's Jewish.
Yeah. Okay,
So when you start saying I got Jewed out of something, and you're asking my producer who's Jewish, and I'm half Jewish. So this kid has a situation where he's driven like 60 hours to get here. And he doesn't have his government ID that will get him into the casino. Now these guys are saying he can't come in, but I don't know if there's anyone here at the casino we can ask. Maybe.
They have the nut, yeah.
Got him.
That's funny.
I don't know. I've been around people saying, when I was in high school, it reminds me of people saying really like not nice phrases like that. And you're just like taken aback, but they like to say it in private. It gives them a bit of a thrill.
There's the transgressiveness of it.
I have no doubt that there are people like that. But this guy's not saying it in private. He's literally saying it in a public hearing.
But he's amongst friends. I mean, look.
So, and to give the context of the situation, apparently a resident offered this audio that he was negotiating with this commissioner about a specific sales tax, and the commissioner said, "I'm gonna have to Jew you. I'm gonna try. Like, can I Jew you down? Like, is there a way for me to Jew you down? Like." And that's what they were discussing. That there were remarks recorded.
It just never occurred to this guy. I mean, listen,
and he's insulated from it because he has an Israel flag in his office too.
Right.
I can say that. Anyway.
Interesting that he makes that sort of affirmative connection there.
But even if he said it in private first, he was comfortable repeating it.
Oh yeah, he didn't see any problem with it.
He wasn't going to say, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that."
He's actively making the argument it is not anti-Semitic.
Right. And like that's sort of a cultural thing, right? Like there's that moment where, like, for instance, like Philistine, right? Like that term, I didn't know this, but etymologically linked to Palestinian.
Right. I said it on the show and people got upset.
And
which
it is
I
like
had no idea.
And so it's like at that point you can either go to this like, oh fuck you, like wokies, like that sort of thing, or you can be like, all right, interesting. I guess our language is a minefield. 'Cause even that kid is like, he went from Jude to gypped.
Exactly. And I don't think Conan even picked up on the jip part.
Right. I didn't know that until very recently.
And so I'm just like, the most important part about that clip is to illustrate how you should not react when somebody tells you this may be offensive. The way you should react is to contemplate like an explicit moment and begin to understand that, like, okay, if it's not appropriate for this Florida, county supervisor to use the word Jew as a way of like negotiating you down, then maybe it's not appropriate for me to say this word or that word in this context for the exact same reason. It's not like, who gets to choose? Like, there's been enough words that are off limit. Why can't my whole freedom of speech has been taken away?
Taking my toys away.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and I'm just saying that like that, there's obviously racists who don't care and anti-Semites who don't care. But there is a cohort of people who do care. They just like, hey, you know, like if you mispronoun somebody.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing if you do it as a mistake. It's one thing to be confused and to be able to sort of like say like, I'm confused.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
But this guy probably thinks nothing's anti-Semitic, though.
I mean, if he had said something like,
I mean, Ilhan Omar.
Except for if a
Ilhan
Muslim
Omar
person
is,
says
yeah.
something. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good point.
Exactly. All right, let's go to the phones here. What do we? Oh, we got a lot of phone callers on. Calling from a 604 area code. Who's this? 604.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I'm Matthew and calling from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Vancouver, Matthew from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about something really cool my province is doing. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. So anyway, it was in the budget that was released from my province this past week and a half, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, they announced that they were going to fund universal contraception. So basically, including everything from Plan B to IUDs and other forms of like contraception. So basically, like it's a really cool program. Funding things like bodily autonomy, because I mean the IUDs cost a lot of money.
Yep.
And so this really does put a lot of power in the hands of working class women and people who otherwise are underprivileged.
Well, Matthew, I mean, it sounds like a lot of stuff in Canada. It's better than we have in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, also with the rollout of $10 a day childcare and perhaps coming pharmacare too. So I'm just really happy about that.
Well, congratulations. Appreciate the call, letting us know. Maybe you can sponsor some of us when we're looking for our citizenship. Call from a 720 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hi. I was calling with to talk about abortion and with a guest recommendation.
Okay, and what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, sorry. A little nervous. Have a little phone anxiety. Linda from Texas.
Linda from Texas. You're doing great.
There's been a lot of stuff going on in abortion across the states, and I wanted to see if maybe you could have Jessica Valenti on. She's been on MSNBC.
No, I know Jessica. I know Jessica. Yeah. She has a great Substack. I think it is on Substack.
Yeah.
Abortion All the Time, is it called?
Abortion Every Day.
Abortion Every Day. Yeah. Yeah, she would be a great guest to have on soon, actually. We should check in on that. But yeah, I read her on a regular basis. She's great.
Okay, great.
Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Bye.
We have a from the Wall Street Journal's explanation of why Silicon Valley Bank failed. Just go back to the earlier theme. Was there regulatory failure? Perhaps SVB was regulated like a bank but looked more like a money market fraud. Then there's this. In its proxy statement, SVB notes that besides 91% of their board being independent and 45% women, they also have 1 black, 1 LGBTQ plus, and 2 veterans. I'm not saying 12 white men would have avoided this mess, but the company may have been distracted by diversity demands.
Is that an actual headline?
No, that's from the Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal.
That's from Andy Kessler at the Wall Street Journal. It's an opinion piece.
The
Wall Street Journal, baby.
No, I thought you were saying it was a Wall Street Journal parody. No, that's actually in the paper.
That's actually in the Wall Street Journal by Andy Kessler.
Who's Andy Kessler?
Oh, that's a good question. He is a guy, columnist.
American businessman, investor, and author. He writes the Inside View column for the Journal and has worked for about 20 years as a research
You
analyst.
gotta be effing kidding me.
What else do they got?
That's just stunning.
Yeah. I'm not saying 12 white men, but I'm just saying.
It would be wrong to take it off the table.
Yeah, it'd be responsible not to ask if if that one black person and the LGBT people didn't distract them a little bit.
I rarely have like the impulse to throw something in this office, but I just clasped my hands together to make sure that didn't happen.
Will you send me a link to that?
Holy shit. Maybe we should
that's the kind of thing.
just read that tomorrow.
That's the kind of thing that you honestly, you hang up on the wall in the office. Like, we'll print that out. Calling from a 712 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Hi. Oh, man. All
right. Let's take a breath.
Okay, I've been trying to call in for weeks, and I just kind of assumed it wasn't going to happen.
Well.
Oh, hello.
All
Sam,
right.
Emma, Matt, Bradley. You
Hello.
guys have all been... Hi, my name's Trent. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska.
Trent from Omaha.
You guys have all been... Yeah. You guys have all been very fundamental in my political journey. Like, specifically your series of debates with libertarians. And I've reached a part in my own political journey where, like, I see people give up on electoralism. Like, if I talk about supporting Bernie, I feel like I'll get a side eye from other leftists. So maybe I'm like too much of a lib or whatever, because like they're right when they say that these policies aren't enough and they're not comprehensive enough. But then when you look back in time at like the New Deal and everything that accomplished, and that socialists and communists at the time then were saying that the New Deal wasn't enough and wasn't comprehensive enough. The thing is that they were also correct at the time, but the New Deal is like the greatest piece of legislation ever passed in America. So it's like, obviously the ultimate goal is to transition into a better state eventually. But in the meantime, people need the things that those like tangible policies could provide.
The only, you're absolutely right. And I think two things can be right. It's not enough and we should still take it. If there was a strong argument that not taking it, it's really basically an accelerationist argument. But if there was a strong argument that not taking it, right, not exerting this effort, I mean, it's like when you talk about voting, it's one thing to say like, okay, we have an organization, we raise money, we do work, we're not going to deploy that in the interest of getting somebody elected because we want to deploy that in terms of mutual aid or doing this or that. That to me seems like a very rational and perfectly, more than legitimate response to something. Like, not everybody goes and spends their days raising, I'm going to go work at a soup kitchen instead of knocking on doors to elect somebody. That's a perfectly legitimate choice. But to not vote is just like, dude, it's like going to the Piggly Wigglies to get a pack of cigarettes, or it's like going to get, a 6-pack of beer. Like what? Like there's no effort associated with it. If you're not doing that, it really is just more about like, you might as well be, talking about like a style that you want to wear it's silly.
It's a form of voter blaming. Like I saw people being like, people will still vote Democrat even after they bail out these banks. It's like, yeah, probably because people vote. Like, sorry, people vote.
Yeah.
Like, and I agree. Like, I think there's like a point where like, DSA or socialist organizations, like people within those organizations say like, it's not the best use of our resources to try to elect people, given that we can't hold them accountable. That's an entirely different thing. But that's a conversation to be had within an organization, frankly, not just blathering on YouTube about how generally people are going to, if they're going to go out and vote or not. Like, I just think it's really weird that people like are so obsessed with like people voting and get mad at it.
It is completely about some form of self-expression that is supposed to make them, I mean, honestly, it is like, I don't listen to that band anymore because they got too popular. I mean, it is on that level, honestly, of reasoning that's associated with it. The only like even argument I would entertain, and I've yet to be like convinced by it, is that if we do not participate in this situation, something good is going to come from it. And the only argument I've ever heard is that people are going to wake up and realize, and it was just like that clip that we played from Charlie Kirk, where Charlie Kirk was like, no, wait, don't do that. Because it's not going to help.
Like the only way that would theoretically work is if it was like a general strike against electoralism where it was organized by an authoritative sort of like the unions or something like that saying, but even then
But if you could do that,
then why don't you do other stuff?
Why wouldn't you
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
do a strike against work, which is far more powerful?
Right. Yeah.
Like the powers that be are not going to be like, oh, what? 90% of the people are not going to show up for this election.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they're.
This is why Chomsky was right in that original bad faith debate where he's like, we spend way too much time on this question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really reassuring to hear you use the word accelerationism because that's how it strikes my ear. So I was feeling like maybe I was the outlier there because a Bernie Sanders presidency would just objectively provide material support that would otherwise not be provided.
Listen, we've already seen the value of voting for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary, even though he lost. We've seen it in the form of people, a stronger National Labor Relations Board. We've seen it in terms of his position on the Help Committee. I mean, it has an impact. And had Joe Manchin been a different human being, we may have had a $4 trillion, $5 trillion, $6 trillion Build Back Better bill because of Bernie Sanders, because of those votes for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. So it sucks that capitalism always has us on the back foot and having to fight for scraps, but those scraps help, man. They just do.
Yeah.
Not fun, but here we are.
Without a doubt.
And that was the whole thing I wanted to say. But also, Hassan and Ethan have been talking about having you on the show, Leftovers. And you guys probably talk about that stuff on the back end, but that's something I would very much love to see happen.
All right, we'll work on it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye. Taliban. Oh, yeah, Sam. 12 white men would have shut that bank down much faster. Trump change. Read racist terminology. I'm half Japanese, and in 6th grade, my friend had a joke you wanted to share. Hey, Ross, are you a Jap or a chink? I'm a Jap. Okay. So this chink walks into a bar. I appreciated him wanting to be sensitive to me.
Oh, my gosh. That's American multiculturalism for you.
All right, one more quick phone call. I know we got to get out of here. 417. And that is the final call of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Calling from 417. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Luke from Ithaca.
From where?
Ithaca.
Ithaca.
Sorry, I'm just getting out of my lab.
You getting out of your lab?
Ooh, Dexter.
Yeah, I'm a graduate student.
There you
I
go.
work in genetics.
I just found out about all those grottos you guys got up there.
Ithaca?
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought
you have
Ithaca grottos.
So you're working in genetics, you
They
said?
do, right?
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a lab. We use, I use CRISPR to manipulate different species of fruit fly. Sort of look at genetic orthology.
Sounds
Whoa, gain of function.
Yeah, kind of interesting related to that. But yeah, when you guys were talking about that story, actually, it's very funny because those are very distinct things with directed evolution versus gain of function. But anyway, my main question was about the East Palestine trail derailment, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you guys were talking about that, it seemed like the coverage of the event was primarily independent media from the left at first, at least what I was seeing. And then it seemed like mainstream media was kind of drug along with the rest of that. Do you think that's an accurate assessment of the order of how things went?
Well, I think local news was covering it quite a bit. And I think the left media, independent media, was a little bit more sensitive to it because of this whole train negotiations, the train workers strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it a lot from the local stuff I'm picking up on Twitter, then through Hassan and you guys. But it seemed like that there could potentially be a new level of power for independent media, for at least leftist stuff, since there's a lot more independent leftist content that's pretty popular. I'm just wondering if that's something that you'd agree with or something you disagree with.
I think it's a little bit early to make that assessment. I mean, I think, like I say, it was in the ether. The stuff about the train strike was really in the ether, not just for the left media. I mean, it was a big issue, and so I think that increased the people's interest in it because there was a specific narrative that again was like it was in the ether.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'm just wondering off the back of that, are there any moves that sort of the independent media people sort of that are aligned with you guys politically that you guys are taking to sort of work on collective messaging or anything like that? I don't know if that would be constructive or not, but it seems like there's a lot of, discipline in messaging from some of the more mainstream things. And I was just wondering if that is something that would be similarly useful
in my
pushing
experience,
particular stories or narratives.
I mean, there was some attempt at stuff like that back in my Air America days a little bit. And in my experience, the problem with people from the center to the left is that
pretty fractious.
It's like just more like we're all convinced that we know the best answer. And one of the things that the right does better is that they have more soldiers. We got a lot of chefs. Let's put it this way. And part of that is also because they get compensated well to be soldiers.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the call. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
On the sort of science note, I'd want to recommend Decoding the Gurus podcast interview with Worobi, Anderson, and Holmes. They had a 3-hour episode with some experts, highly placed experts central to this, that like people that get criticized by the Republicans, for instance, responding to a lot of the lab leak stuff. And it's the first time I've really dug deep on it, but I will say it makes like Sam Harris is looking closely at it and saying, we got to be open to these sorts of theories, but it looks like the evidence for the lab leak theory is pretty, actually thin.
I think
so all these Jimmy Dore types saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, they lied to us about the lab."
Oh
leak
yeah.
theory."
They admitted as
first
such
off,
in the release of the information, right? That it was low confidence.
they said low confidence in the
Yes.
conclusion,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
And even the FBI's. I've read some threads on the FBI stuff, but it's like, is it possible? Of course, it's possible.
Yeah.
Right now, the preponderance of the evidence is such that it did not come from there.
And like these intelligence, it's also an irony that we're basing it off of these new announcements by the intelligence agencies. And if you listen to these experts, like they're like, yeah, they're not incorporating a lot of things we know now.
Yeah. Ethan Klein and his crew installed a big button they can use to erase 10 seconds of footage when hit. I guess like live TV. Anyway, you don't need to worry about being canceled on leftovers. Sadie Stone.
Useful.
Yeah, it's a delay. We used to have that on radio. We don't have it here. Henry. Funny moment setting up my grandma with Aura. I turned on the VPN and it stopped her dating site from working. I Googled it to discover that Zeus had a big data leak a year or two ago, and now she's getting way less spam. All right. Owen from Miami. Hey, Sam, I've been putting ZipRecruiter ads out for Dennis Miller impersonator. Incidentally, the demand for Dennis Miller impersonators has dropped precipitously despite his absence. Anyways, I've gotten some quality candidates, and I can test the ZipRecruiter's utility. Militant apathy. That is literally the best excuse for cheating I've ever heard. QAnon made me snort coke and F her. That is awesome. Classic reverse PS. What about Elon Musk and QAnon? Isn't he out there spouting some of this shit? Maybe our girl Judy Gold needs to hear this.
I mean, it's more widespread, this kind of thinking, than you would want to believe. You don't have to be a card-carrying QAnon member to still hold those views.
Torque, the 2008 collapse. Have you seen any analysis regarding that that highlighted the fact that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac relaxed their underwriting standards to eliminate the requirement that borrowers' incomes be independently verified? They did that well after everybody else had. In fact, there was a lot of pressure for them to do that because their job is to buy those from other banks, and they couldn't. And so that may have contributed to it, but they weren't the first to do that. They were on the tail end of that. They were the tail as opposed to the dog in that instance. I practice real estate law in California and know that what led to widespread overstatement of incomes, often encouraged by loan agents and a flood of loans made to borrowers who couldn't pay. Those are the kind of garbage loans that were packaged into mortgage-backed securities, so many of which proved worthless. The abandonment of the basic underwriting standard of income verification may not have been a sufficient cause of the financial collapse, but it seemed to have been a necessary one. I haven't seen that pointed out. Yeah, there was actually a lot written about that at the time. That you can see that they did that years into the bubble. I mean, I was read into this stuff in a way that I, obviously not today.
It's all coming back.
It's all coming back. Kowalski from Nebraska. Howdy, Emma Majority Report. So for the last 2 weeks, the Sandhill crane migration has brought several 100,000 birds to central Nebraska. The whole population is currently in a 50-mile stretch of the Platte River. If you're not aware of the migration, you should check out some videos on it. Seeing tens of thousands of birds lift off in your cornfield is a very noisy thing, and the overcast they cause is mind-boggling. I do recall a Southern evangelical once describing Trump as Sirius the Great of Persia, not a man of our faith, but of a great and powerful person that God is using to help his chosen people on earth. There you go. Matty Moron. The Tea Party, the Trump base, and the Q stuff all draw from different sections of the same class formation, the reactionary and downwardly mobile petty bourgeoisie. This has historically been a mass base for far-right and fascist movements. Trotsky actually has some good writing about this when he was living in late Weimar, Germany. As a class, they live in absolute terror of proletarianization, and as such are willing to throw in with the most savage political forces that promise to beat back the proletarian hordes and stabilize their class position. People are afraid of being downwardly mobile. This is the way to put that. I am convinced, however, that I would imagine, Matty Moron, you're going to have a problem with me saying this, maybe, that dynamic I do not think is exclusive to material things. That I think that what is, and this is an argument we were having for a long time in the wake of the Trump thing, was the zero-sum game. You remember this, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
I think, personally, that social cachet, or cash, not in the form of actual money, but perceiving yourself on the social totem pole is not so distinct from the material implications of your life, that it is just as threatening, or can be, for some people to watch TV and not see themselves reflected on TV in the way that they used to be, or to pick up a phone and have to press, 2 for English, as like maybe some precarity in terms of what they perceive from their economic position. That's what I would add to that. I think if you are more of a materialist, you would not necessarily buy into that. But because if you look at the statistics in terms of like we can't know how precarious the wealthier people who vote for Trump feel in terms of their finances. We do know how precarious they feel in terms of like losing their social status, because as soon as you put a microphone in front of them, they're talking about black people.
Yeah.
And they're talking about women. And they're talking about their inability to, they're being oppressed by wokeness. I'm not convinced it's a distraction as much as it has value to people. If you can have a concept of dignity of work, you can certainly have a concept of, I'm not low man on the totem pole here.
I mean, that's like the racial projects of the 19th century, like pretty explicitly, like we're going to give you a sort of identitarian recognition, and that often translates into like what sort of jobs you can get and stuff like that. But basically, it drives the entire culture.
And I'm not convinced an extra $300 a month for your kid. I think that's hugely important for other reasons, but I'm not convinced that that's going to convince that person of like, you know what? I'm not as worried about where I stand in society, even though it seems like every sitcom has a black guy, or a black woman. Or I can't go to work and just make the one comment like nice legs. Didn't mean nothing by it. Kentucky Bloomer. Sam, victimization appears to be the mainstay of modern right-wing messaging where systemic issues are reframed by right politicians to create a sense of victimhood among their constituents. My question is, do you think this is a result of 9/11? As I don't recall victimhood being a leading message from the right prior to 2001.
I mean, check out Corey Robin's Reactionary Mind. Goes back to the French Revolution.
This is long
Look
time.
what you did to Marie Antoinette.
Oh yeah, no, totally. That's just the way the mindset works. Abe, same people funding student loan forgiveness legal battles to block it are now begging for a bailout. Show far away. QAnon is just blood libel dressed up in digital clothing. They're trafficking in a medieval anti-Semitic conspiracy theory propagated by Tsar Nicholas in Russia, Nazi Germany, and the Klan of the United States. Most Q followers have never heard of it, which is why ignorance of history is central to movements like this. Also, Henry Ford used to distribute literature, including protocols, with every Model T purchase. All right, 4 more and we're out of here. Policy wonk. Been following everything for a while, but I think the FDIC paying out everything even over $250K, which was supposed to be the insurance limit, I'm totally blown away. The same Fed that's cutting jobs to curb prices is going to turn around and unrightfully pay out billions to obviously wealthy people. And on Dodd-Frank, what's the point of lowering the threshold of regulations if conservatives want banks to work within them anyway? Not sure I follow that. They literally want banks to pump out dividends and buybacks and then have everyone bailed out by the federal institutions they try and dismantle when the casino banks inevitably fail. I'm going to live in the woods now. There are thousands of banks to split your money over to. You can get treasury bills or just hold the cash. Of course, there's a risk involved in depositing in a bank over $250, which is a reason the benefits are so much better than smaller amount. Yes, indeed. That's the whole point. Tommy from Yacubia, Sam Seder calls for crusade against casual anti-Semitism. Dr. Shock, stand-up comedians, and I already read that. Normal human. It's also understandable that a lot of people don't vote because it can be so hard to draw the connection of voting to how it will benefit ordinary people's lives. Yes, I agree with that. And many communities aren't as simple to vote. It may involve waiting hours in line. I agree with all that. But if you're going to a TPUSA conference, or you're listening to this show, or you're following politics, then you don't follow politics if you don't think it impacts your life. Right? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about those people. We need to reach those people, but that's not who I'm talking about. Kirby424, shout out to all the lab rats listening to the show while doing experiments. Last time I called in, I did it in a lab. And the final IM of the day. Daredevil, have you considered doing a promo for ZipRecruiter's dating service? Unzip Recruiter. We got to get that little, yeah, you got to get that thing operating. Bradley, Matt, Emma, good job today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted